Ladies, when did you get friend-zoned by a guy? Guys on the internet need a huge reality check. Here's mine. I had this crush on my study buddy in college, and one night he casually looked at me and said to me, "You know why we're such great study buddies? Because we never have to worry about physical attraction or banging each other." See, in my experience, a solid majority of males are oblivious to hints that chicks think are blatantly obvious. I was talking to my boyfriend the other day about before we got together, and a lot of the things I did to try and let him know I was mega into him, they weren't even noticed. In the end, a simple, "I'm into you, we should go out," does the trick really well. Long story short, men suck at getting clues from women, partly because of evolution and social dynamics. So, ladies, don't throw hints, throw bricks. Otherwise, we'll never know, and then you get the guys who assume every woman wants their babies, and the rest who assume that nobody loves them. This one guy would come over to my house and insist on cuddling and watching movies the whole time. He'd keep me up all night on the phone because he slept better when he could hear my voice, and then send me good morning texts and hold my hand whenever the opportunity presented itself. Then he told his best friends that he wished I'd just get over it. I was in love with my best friend for 3 years. We did everything together. We went to the movies, had Doctor Who nights, went hiking. He'd even stopped by to talk to me at work and texted me every night about which episodes of Star Trek were on. He told me all of his crap and I told him mine. He helped me out of my depression, and when I became an unspeakable act victim, he was the first person I told. We gave each other gifts and everyone thought we were dating. He even encouraged the image when we were out in public. But it never went anywhere. Instead of telling me he simply wasn't attracted to me, we continued a charade of couple-like behavior. He started dating someone, and I felt the need to be blunt, blunter than I'd already been. I told him I loved him, and then he didn't talk to me for a year. He got married in September. Oh, and I'm engaged now, so I guess it all worked out for the best in the end. Haha, well, we're all happy for you. The narrator should note he generally doesn't think the friend zone is a thing, especially in the cases where he hears guys talking about women they've been nice to, not wanting to jump into bed with them, but it did make for a good, well-known concept to introduce the video with. One of my good friends left for the army. I know how lonely you can feel in the military, so I decided to drop over $500 to go halfway across America to a crappy city in Georgia that's basically the first level of hell. It was one tumbleweed-filled mall, a few fast food restaurants, and my hotel. That hotel was not great, but it was worth it to see him just for a few days. We'd been friends since middle school. He was there when my boyfriend broke my heart. I was there when his girlfriend did the same. It was a beautiful friendship, really, and people often made comments about us being a couple. I kinda got sucked into the thought, to be honest. Anyways, I go to a crappy city in Georgia just to spend a few days with him. We have a sweet running reunion jump hug combo. He shows me off to a few of his army friends. We get shakes and burgers together at this old-fashioned Ma and Pa diner, and the next day all we do is cuddle and laugh. We held hands through this crappy one-horse mall. He helped me pick out a cute summer dress. I even initiated a kiss or two. It was like a frickin' movie. It was beautiful. I even wrote a poem that night. I was so inspired by the overflow of emotions. A few months later, he comes back home. I invited him over to have a Skyrim party with a few friends. Denied. Oh, invited him to go dinner? Nope. Okay, hang out? Watch movies and cuddle? Make hot cocoa? Drive-by high five? Nada. Nothing. Zip. I didn't get to see him for about 2 months, and he lived right down the road. Turns out his ex, who was dating his best friend while he was gone, told him to stop hanging out with me, and after I asked him about it, I got the classic, "We make better friends than a couple anyways." Frickin' frick. In short, I spent way too much frickin' money to see a guy who wanted absolutely nothing to do with me. You know, multiple men have told me that I'm just like a bro. Different guys and girlfriends seem undecided on whether this means I was getting hit on or friend-zoned. I had the biggest crush on my friend in college. I'd invite him over to study several times. Imagine Cher in Clueless with the hair tossing and the rolling off the bed. Nothing ever came of it, and I thought he just missed the signals. A couple of years later, drunk at a New Year's party, I confessed what I thought was my biggest secret. He admitted that he knew all along and had deftly avoided my advances. It was embarrassing for all involved. Weirdest ever. I'd been hanging out with this guy for almost a year. He liked me and I liked him. I went over to his house once for his birthday, we went to his room and made out a bit. The door was cracked and in came his dog. The dog then started to growl and bite my ankles. A week later, I asked if he wanted to be more than friends, and he, exact quote, said, "We can't date. My dog hates you. I'm afraid he might hurt you. I hope we can stay friends. I like you, but I love my dog." Friend-zoned by a frickin' dog. I kept getting friend-zoned by this guy that I liked and had been friends with for about 3 years. My feelings didn't start right away. I got vibes from him, or at least I thought they were vibes. One night we were both wasted and we ended up sleeping together. And I thought to myself, oh my god, this is it. He's gonna tell me he has feelings for me too. He ended up telling me that he's gay and that he wasn't trying to force something that wasn't there. But after our drunken encounter, he realized he wasn't even attracted to girls. This really was the best outcome, as now we're best friends and he found himself in the process. I fell hard for a boy. We spent a collective 2 months in a casual fling, spread over 5 months. He serenaded me. A few days later, he tells me that he wants to get back with his ex. Whatever, get over him. Mostly. All is well. Then 6 months later, he calls me and tells me he needs someone to talk to. I, of course, go with him. He drives me around while ranting about his, once again, ex-girlfriend. We drive past a place where apparently they did the deed in a parking lot, and he tells me all about it. He spends about 2 hours telling me why he's crazy about this girl and why she makes him so mad. And then he takes me home and never talks to me again. Yay! This one guy walked me home in order to ask for my friend's phone number. I went on a couple of dates with one guy I'd met through friends, or so I thought. We proceeded to hook up, and then 3 days later he was dating another girl. He thought we were both just lonely and hanging out. I thought he was the bee's knees. We're great friends to this day, but I cried every time I saw him for the longest time. I've friend-zoned guys before myself, but never since that day. I make it a point to be very upfront and honest. I didn't realize how much worse than heartbreak the friend zone felt. The last couple of weeks, I've been on 5 to 6 dates with this guy, a cop that I've known for years. Yesterday, he texted me, "I'm really enjoying hanging out with you. I know we're not boyfriend-girlfriend material, but I can see us being great friends." Today, he asked me out for lunch and told me about the date he had last night. He told me it wasn't a romantic date, just a friend date, like what we do. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm being friend-zoned. Unlike most people, when I like someone like that and I learn that they don't like me like that back, I usually stop hanging out with them. I don't want to torture myself. So no, I haven't been friend-zoned. I think it's a choice. You can accept it and move on, or live in a fantasy hell you've created all on your own. What I've learned from this thread is when guys get friend-zoned, it's, "Derp, you're such a great guy and would be the perfect boyfriend, but you're just not the right one for me. In other words, you're nice but I'm not attracted to you, but let's still hang out." And when girls get friend-zoned, derpet, even though we've already been hanging out like crazy and have done things that are wildly inappropriate for a normal friendship, hand-holding, cuddling, making out, or sleeping together, I don't want to have a relationship with you. I can't say which is worse, but they both suck a lot. After getting the opportunity to read almost all of these stories, my opinion is, when this happens to you, just cut said perpetrator out of your life until you absolutely have no more feelings for them. It sucks to lose a friend, but it sucks more to be emotionally used and neglected. I mean, I guess both of these suck, but the narrator has definitely kept up healthy friendships after being turned down or sleeping with someone. I think it might vary from person to person, but if you're mentally strong enough to just accept that things can't be like that, it can work. God damn, I keep reading these stories and for some reason I keep hoping it'll end out okay. Disney has not prepared me for this. This kinda goes along with this thread. I totally friend-zoned this girl in high school. I'd gone to elementary and middle school with her as well, and she was always sort of the weird girl of the girly group. She wasn't chubby, but she wasn't skinny either. Anyway, fast forward 2 years, she plays the trombone in the high school band and has one of her friends give me this note asking me to the Sadie Hawkins. I said no, mostly because I wasn't planning on going at all, but also because she was just a little out there for my tastes. In college, I met her at a bar once, and now she's frickin' gorgeous, smart, and hilarious. I think ultimately, I lost. We decide in the present situation, not the future, and what we decide today might change that. I refused a girl who used me as her motivation to get better. I got refused, and now I'm using that to get better myself. It's always a win-win situation. Alright ladies, this is friend-zoning. I had a massive crush in high school, head over heels. We became friends because I learned that on TV, friendship leads to being girlfriend-boyfriend. Curse you, 90s romantic comedies that promised me the shy, quiet loner when applied a montage makeover sequence could get anything of their dreams. It became clear that this person didn't like me in that way, but wanted to stay friends. That sucks, but okay. I hit on another person almost a year later, and my former crush breaks down in tears because they're afraid they'll lose me and doesn't like seeing me with other people. Because I'm young and naive, I take this for hope that I've actually got a shot with her. Nope. Next 2 years of constant rebuffs, the slightest hints that I'm attracted to anyone else leads to waterworks. Now that is friend-zoning. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. You know, I may or may not have friend-zoned a girl a few years ago without even realizing it at the time. I worked at an animal hospital when I was in high school. There was one other girl who was my age, and we became good friends, joking around at work. After a few months, rumors started to spread that we liked each other, and I laughed them off as my coworkers being nosy. I didn't like her. So one day, she came up to me and asked me if I'd like to get pizza after work. We hadn't hung out outside of work, so I said sure. It was fun, but at work, everyone called it a date. I said I wasn't sure and that we were just friends. She obviously heard this, so she asked if I'd like to go on a date with her. I told her I wasn't really looking for a relationship at the time. Right around this time, I left the hospital and we drifted apart. I started dating a girl from my school shortly thereafter. A few weeks later, I decided to try and talk with the girl at the animal hospital, and she was very upset with me. Apparently, she'd had to work up the courage to ask me out for a long time, and the fact that I told her I wasn't looking for anything and then started dating someone so soon after hurt her feelings a lot. I've never felt worse, and to be honest, I kind of wish I could go back and take her on a date. She was and is an awesome girl. I've never been friend-zoned before because I'm not pretty or extroverted enough for guys to be my friends. Yay, loneliness! A college friend and I reconnected over Facebook after 8 years. He ended up married to his college girlfriend. No big deal. We kept in touch via Messenger on occasion and were chatting. Nothing inappropriate, but we actually became quite good friends. I met up with him when he visited my town on business. I was engaged then, so he also met my then fiancée. He was the emotional support through that horrendous breakup, and I was his emotional support when he went through his divorce. His wife of 10 years cheated on him twice. Throughout that time, he told me stuff like, "You're the perfect girl," and "Why are you still single?" and all that nonsense. We made plans for him to come to my apartment and drink whiskey and watch ridiculous movies when he was emotionally ready for that. Only it never happened. He started dating a girl 10 years younger than him and me, telling me about how every guy wants her and what does she see in me? She's so attractive. That was the point I cut all communication and moved the frick on with my life. You know, this kind of thing happened to me all the time until my second year of college. I graduated this past spring. The worst one was that I was so in love with my closest male friend in high school, I did end up telling him about 6 months after I met him, but I knew he was after another girl. When things with her didn't work out, about 3 months later, he acted reciprocal towards me, even telling me he'd like to date me, but had some other things to work out for himself and his feelings first. Well, fast forward another 3 months and he ends up falling for another girl. About a year into their relationship, he tells me while I'm at his brother's birthday with him that there's something about me he finds attractive and would like to investigate. Oh, and also that he could never see himself staying with his current girl forever. I never really got the hint and moved on until after he eventually did marry that same girl. They've been divorced for about 2 years now. I had an absolutely massive 4-year-long crush on a friend of mine. I got worse than friend-zoned though. "You're just like a sister to me." Just recently, he came out of the closet and he asked me if I'd think it was okay if he hooked up with my brother. I'm a guy and I've apparently friend-zoned a few females before. Although I hate the use of the term friend-zone, I much prefer the term selective dating. There have been a few females before who, even though they are very attractive women, I'd felt I'd benefit more from a friendship with them than a relationship. I feel it's important for myself to have a mix of male and female friends, and although some of you might find this hard to comprehend, I truly believe this is the best path to a healthy lifestyle. Yeah, the narrator maintains his disagreement that either party can expect a relationship without actually having a conversation about it. People who say they're friend-zoned often feel entitled to something from the other, but most of the time neither party has actually asked the other one out or set up a firm boundary. It is messy and complicated, but friend-zoning is generally just a term used by people who've never laid out their feelings on the table to begin with. I've had my current job for about 7 months now. I'm a secretary in a doctor's office. It's a bigger office and there's a few doctors there, and one of them has this amazingly hot son who comes in to help out every now and again when he's not in school. He and I became good friends over time, and I inevitably developed feelings for him, which I assumed were mutual judging by his constant flirting and compliments. So you can imagine my surprise when he pulls me aside one day and asks for my advice because he's planning on proposing to the girlfriend I didn't know existed until that very moment. If I'd had gonads, they would have shriveled up and crawled back inside me. Hello, friendzone, you merciless son of a witch. You know, a guy has to be pretty out of touch to not realize that no girl can get any guy she wants. The whole friendzone thing stems from the idea that if a guy does the right thing, the girl will fall for him. Like pickup artist moves. It ignores the fact that women care what you look like and don't want all the same behaviors from a guy. But my favorite story about a guy not being interested was I was once set up with a guy on a group trip. From the second we met, I realized he wasn't interested and I was willing to switch to friend mode. The guy proceeded to make it so awkward that I had to avoid him entirely. It was like he thought I was going to lunge on him if I got within 5 feet of him. Totally in love with the guy who introduced me to Reddit. He pays for my meals, cooked me dinner once, offered to meet my parents the last time he picked me up for dinner. Sounds not so bad, right? Last week we were at a bar with some friends, and he brought up the birthday gift I gave him and said, "Yep, she's the greatest friend ever," and tried to give me a high five. I witnessed my own friend-zoning moment. Actually, eventually I did tell him how I felt, and I did not get the response I would have hoped for. I cried a whole bunch. A friend of mine in high school knew I was madly in love with him, so he just manipulated me as much as he could to get what he wanted out of me. So, yeah. I was seriously attracted to a coworker and we became fast friends. We hung out a lot, went on travels together, shared hotel rooms, but he never busted a move on me. Finally, on a trip to Vegas with him, I got sort of drunk and kissed him. He pushed me away and said that he didn't feel that way about me. I was pretty crushed and embarrassed, so he just held me until I fell asleep. I was really confused. I've never had a problem with men before. This was the only guy who didn't at least want to sleep with me, so I went and convinced myself that he must be gay. He was attractive, but never had anything to do with women. Flash forward a few years, he's engaged to an absolutely stunning, cool as heck, really accomplished woman. Turns out he wasn't gay. He just had really high standards in women and really high standards in personal behavior. Also, yes, I'm well aware that assuming he was gay because he wasn't into me makes me a scumbag moxie. Live and learn. Similar situation from the perspective of the guy in the story. I worked with this girl at summer camp last year and we hung out all the time. Let's call her Jenna. I let her know early on I wasn't interested, but she was convinced otherwise. I'd told Jenna face to face twice that I didn't like her. Fast forward to the beginning of the fall semester and I'm moving into a new apartment. She comes over to help me move in, still thinking that I'm set on her, and we get into an argument when I refuse to make out with her. 3 hours of Jenna telling me I was lying to myself, that I really did like her no matter what I said, and how she didn't want to miss any opportunities, though she knew I wasn't interested. No, witch, you're just crazy. So, let me get this straight. The guys of Reddit can share their friendzone stories, but if the ladies do, we get told he just didn't want to date a fatty, or quiet girls that have a crush on someone and then that someone starts dating another girl isn't considered friendzoning, it's you needing to man up, or something along these lines. Get a grip, guys, you're all just as guilty as us ladies. I've noticed a lot of the female stories are quickly being shot down with, "That's not friendzoning, you just don't understand," when in reality their stories are 95% the same as the male friendzoning stories on here. One of the main perspectives that I've noticed keeps popping up here is that apparently guys often mention how weird it would be to date a lady that's taller than they are. Please stop this. Although I do usually tend to reply along the lines of, "It doesn't matter how tall we are lying down," automatically unfriendzoned. Also, I'm 6'1" and I've heard this line more often than I'd like to. It can be a real bummer. Girls don't get friend-zoned, they get F-buddied. There was a girl in my class who kept on glancing at me and giggling and stuff, and then I found notes with hearts and things in my locker, in my bag, on my desk. I knew it was that girl because I recognized her handwriting. She wrote things like, "I love you, I want to be your slave," and things gradually got sicker. "Pull down my dress and kiss my forest," or "When are we going to get married? I'm all ready for you down there if you know what I mean." She was actually a weirdo in my class, very scary, and I had no heart for her. So I just walked up to her and said, "I'm sorry, but I'm unable to accept your transaction of love. My heart cannot proceed with such a course. I hope it's okay to keep some distance away from each other as friends. One of my best guy friends in high school who I had a little bit of a crush on said to me, "Hey, guess what just happened?" I said, "What?" I asked Alison to prom and she said, "Yes, we're going to the movies this weekend too." Great! Notice how few to none of these stories have segments of anger and bitterness where the girls decry all men as only liking witches, and how all the nice girls can't get anyone. I fell for a religious 15-year-old guy, told him about my crush, and he replied, "That's inappropriate. That was a slap in the frickin' face."
Have you ever correctly had a gut feeling to dislike someone who, on the surface, was a cool person that everybody else liked? What's that story? Content warning. A lot of these are going to involve a lot of inappropriate assault and some underage stuff. So if you're not comfortable with that, probably best to avoid this video. City Council hired another medic. Older dude with long hair, not that that matters. He was new to the scene, recently completing the course. Guy was awesome to hang out with. Went to the bar with the younger EMTs, played video games, etc. At first I thought he was cool, but as I observed his work, I was his superior and did his probationary eval, I noticed something was off. At the private council meeting, I spoke openly about this in his 30-day review. I stated something was off. He didn't seem like a people person and generally the type that would do this job. They said that I had no grounds to state that he wasn't suited and that he did his job as described. I countered with the fact that when caring for people, being a people person is an unwritten rule, and that doing your job without caring leads to mistakes. And in our job field, a mistake means death. They weren't having it, so I finally said, "Look, in this job field, you need to learn to read people, and I'm telling you that something isn't right here." City Council told me that basically I was jealous because he got along with the EMTs. Honestly, I could care less. I'm not in this job for them. Fast forward a month and I get a call from an ER about an hour from us. They said that their report said the patient was administered 80 milligrams of drug X. The patient denied receiving it, and since they couldn't figure out why the heck the medic would have even given it, they ran a tox panel on him which showed that he did not receive it. The doc told me normally he'd let it slide as an error and asked me to speak to him about accuracy, but he felt something was off. I thanked him and after hanging up, pulled the trip sheets. Right in the run report, it has the drug, the amount given, and the time. I pulled up the narcotics log. It showed drug given and replenished along with the tag numbers. Next, I called a friend of mine who was a local cop and was off duty at the time. He came over and I opened the other medic's narc box. Sure enough, it had been opened and replaced. We then went through his logs for the past 2 months he had been working and located at least 12 times drugs had been given when probably not needed. I called the ER doc back and explained to him, and his exact quote, "Here's my personal phone number and our lawyer's number. I'll fax you over a written statement along with the test results. I'll see if we have anything on other patients he brought in." My buddy then called dispatch to tell the council members there was an emergency at the station and they need to come in. When they got there, we showed them all the evidence and what we suspected. Within 15 minutes, we not only had the DA approval, but also a judge sign an arrest warrant. Turns out the dude admitted to having a 20-year painkiller addiction. He ran out of sources, so I figured being a medic would give him easy access. He even told the judge he was worried that he would have killed someone just for the meds. At the trial, I was asked for what resolution I wanted. I told the judge, being a paramedic, I've seen how drugs change a person and that I don't hold him fully responsible. On my recommendation, he got 3 months in a locked drug rehab facility, followed by 6 months of house arrest. 4 years later, the dude is clean and runs a fundraiser to help raise money for the END to provide anonymous Narcan services and drug awareness programs. Today, this guy will be an honored member of my crew. Addiction literally changes people. The end result is I now am solely responsible for hiring the medics, reviewing, and dismissal. I no longer need to justify to counsel why someone was dismissed. This job is one where a gut feeling decides someone's fate. Sometimes our gut instincts are only sort of right. When I was in 7th grade, there was this girl who was really quiet and sort of creepy, and she smelled like crap, literally. She wore these odd dresses that looked like pioneer dresses, homemade, and she was just, well, creepy. No one talked to her. People tried to avoid sitting next to her. We all gossiped about her as being the epitome of creepiness. Then one day, she was gone. Didn't come to class. The next day, it was all over the news. the police had arrested these horrifically abusive parents who were neglecting and abusing their daughter and who had kept their younger son locked in a cage his entire life and never fed him. The younger boy was kept alive by, you guessed it, his older sister. The police were led to the house by neighbors' complaints about the stench. So this poor, smelly girl was suffering abuse from her parents, and all the while sneaking food and water to her little brother, who was literally locked in a cage for years upon years, keeping him alive, and then coming to school where she would be avoided and mocked behind her back and sometimes humiliated. She was a weirdo, and our guts all told us there was something wrong there. But she was a freaking hero. Never heard what happened to her after the parents were arrested. Hope she recovered. I never trusted my ex-BF's uncle. I just knew he was trouble and had issues with him visiting or my ex visiting him. He was arrested in Florida last year for production and selling meth and hosting a prostitution ring out of his home. Later learned the ex partook in all the activities at his uncle's home. Apparently my gut was right about the uncle, but not about my ex. My snake did. I had the sweetest, chillest ball python who never nipped or hissed or reared up or anything. She'd just curl up with you and hang out. One day, a friend brought over some of his friends, and all of a sudden, my snake went nuts, standing straight up in her tank and hissing at one of the guys. A couple of weeks later, that dude robbed my house while I was out of town. R.I.P. Guinevere, a good snake. Interviewing a guy for a job. Something doesn't feel right, but my interviewing partner really seemed to like him. We get to his portfolio of work, and I see my side project that I worked on alone as one of his websites. So I start asking him questions about it, what challenges he had, how the client was, etc. I let him go on and on. Then I say, I have to level with you. This is my work. You are showing me my own work. Look at the source near the footer. It has my website in the comments. He went ghost white, and I just sat there. After that, I coached him a little on how not to suck, and he left. We called the contract agency that sent him and let them know. My sister's first husband. I was 5 when they got married, and I only actually met him a few times in person because they lived on the other side of the country. My family really loved him. He was charming, athletic, smart, handsome, financially secure, and seemed like a great dad when they had kids. Plus, he was never anything but nice to me. But I always sensed something shady about the guy. When I was in the 5th grade, I remember getting in huge trouble for a class assignment, an essay describing our families, in which I described him as a bad person, pretty much word for word, quote, "There's something I just don't like about him." It was one of the only times I got spanked as a child. Well, fast forward a couple of years, and my parents discovered that he'd been abusive to my sister and the kids almost the whole time. They ended up divorcing, and he has proven to be a complete sociopath ever since. He hadn't paid a dime in child support, despite being well off enough to buy a new luxury sports car every few years, and uses their 2 kids, who are now teenagers who know he's full of crap, to play mind games with my sister, bringing her to court for full custody, knowing he won't win due to his past, just to cause her inconvenience and rack up legal fees for her, just as an example. He also has refused to let the kids fly out to visit our side of the family a few times for no reason whatsoever. He's a jerkwad, a narcissist, a complete sociopath, and somehow, 10-year-old me was able to sense it before anyone else in the family. My mom brought her new boyfriend over the house one time for me to meet him. He weirded me out. I can't tell you why, but I didn't like him. Maybe it's because he was a 35-year-old man who wore visors. Friendly and funny guy who my family liked. A year into their relationship, he beat the crap out of my mom and stole her dog. Probably the closest I've come to an assassination attempt. Edit 1. I didn't go after him as not to implicate my mom. Also, we got our dog back. Edit 2. Yep, he's in jail. My childhood best friend's mother's boyfriend. He creeped me out and I hated being over at her house when he was there. Her family went on a ski trip with mine, and my parents both thought he was great, funny, charming, etc. They didn't understand why I didn't like him. Years later, my best friend told me that he inappropriately abused her starting when she was about 9. I probably was picking up on her fear of him. So my husband has this cousin, Jason, and he loathes them, always has since he was a small child. There are stories about my husband trying to beat Jason when he was 5. It was so bad that as an adult, my husband refused to attend any family gatherings that Jason would be, out of the fear that he would beat the living crap out of him. Nobody could ever figure out why my husband hated his cousin so much. He had never done anything to him, and my husband is the most laid-back and friendly person I've ever met. He genuinely likes everyone, except for this guy. I never understood it myself, never having met Jason, and anytime I would ask my husband about it, he would always say, "I freaking hate that kid. He's not right." Jason was pretty well liked throughout the family, so my husband's position caused him to catch a lot of crap from other family members. I finally got to meet Jason a few years ago at my brother-in-law's wedding, and I saw right off what my husband was talking about. To the casual observer, there was nothing tangible that Jason did that you could put your finger on, but something was off. He would laugh and smile, but the smile didn't go all the way to his eyes. His eyes were just flat and empty. Unless he was looking at the girls at the wedding. And when I say girls, I mean children under 10. When he looked at those girls, his eyes lit up with this sick little light. You know how someone who hasn't eaten in a long time looks when they finally get a meal they love set in front of them? That's how Jason's eyes looked when he looked at those little girls, like he was hungry and they were his meal. About 2 years ago, Jason's dad married a woman with 2 young daughters. Jason went off and volunteered to babysit. About a year ago, Jason was arrested and convicted of forcing himself on both of those little girls multiple times. Screw you, Jason. I wish my husband had beat you, you creepy son of a gun. When I played high school football, we had an equipment manager who had been doing the job for decades and was absolutely adored by the community. Guy was in his 70s or 80s. One day, I'm ready for a game early, so I head out to the bus that's taking us. I see him loading stuff up, so I offer to help him load a few things. Once we're all loaded on the bus, he walks to me in the back, because I was a cool kid, and hands me a Hostess cupcake in front of everyone as a thank you. He handed me the cupcake, looked me in the eye, and this sense of dread just falls on me. I have no idea why, and everyone's looking at me, so I act normal. I eat the cupcake, because I was, and still am, fat and will eat any cupcake you hand me, and just kinda write off the feeling. That summer, he was arrested for inappropriately assaulting some 15-year-old girl. I'm pretty sure they thought he did more, but couldn't prove it or something. While in the Army, we moved into a new house in upstate New York. We were being neighborly and talked to a guy across the street. He had 5 kids, no wife. He also had multiple neighborhood kids playing in the yard. He told us we can always send ours over. He gave us both this horrible feeling, so we smiled and got out. About a year later, my wife told me, I was in Kandahar, that his kids were taken from him. He had been touching them at least ever since his wife died. About 15 years ago, I worked in a small office, mostly men, all who I really liked. A new guy started one day, and instantly I had a bad feeling about him. I don't even know exactly why I felt that way, and all the other people seemed fine with him, so I did my best to be polite and find things to talk to him about. I was in my mid-30s. He was about the same or a little older, and we both had young sons, so I was able to find some common ground. Apparently he and his wife didn't live together. She might have been back in his home country, but I could never shake that bad feeling. A year or so later, I had left the company to have my second son, and a friend who had taken my place there called me one morning and said, "Did you read the paper today?" That man had been arrested in another state, apparently having been set up by an FBI sting online, where he'd been chatting with who he thought was a 13-year-old girl and was meeting up with her. In the trunk of his car, they found a video camera and rope. I worked as a CNA in a nursing home during/right after high school. We got a new guy that made a lot of mistakes and obviously had some cognitive impairments. I'm not sure what was wrong exactly, but it was obvious that he was mentally slow. Leaving a patient with the feeding tube laying flat, increasing their chance of aspirating food into their lungs, for example. On several occasions, I complained about him to our supervisor and also vented to my coworkers that I just did not feel right about him. Everyone accused me of not having any compassion. They said he was slow, but that he would get it and I should be more understanding. They all thought that I was being judgmental because of his disability, but it felt like more than that to me. One night, another CNA went to answer a call light and walked in on him forcing himself on an elderly bedridden woman. He didn't even stop, just held eye contact with the coworker until he was finished. This all happened over 15 years ago. He went to jail obviously, but I saw him in Walmart last summer, so he is out now. I sure hope he is never able to work in a position to take advantage of vulnerable people ever again. Yes, but I suppressed it so quickly and fast because I felt like it was horribly ungracious since she was being so friendly. Over the next couple years, she became my closest friend in the new town I had moved to. Then the following couple years, it vacillated between being close but just feeling like she really didn't want me around or was messing with me a little bit. Turns out she was having an affair with my husband and was literally intentionally driving me crazy. There was a man that would walk around my neighborhood with samurai swords on his back. He also had a golden retriever that would follow him everywhere. As children, we were always intrigued by the swords and obviously wanted to pet his dog as well. He would never let us and yelled at us if we got too close. I'm at Chevron getting some gas and 20 cop cars surround a man by the dumpster. Turns out, this guy had just killed a woman in the woods of North Carolina, chopped her into pieces, presumably with the samurai swords, and was dumping the bloody clothes in said dumpster. His name was Gary Michael Hilton, and he's presumed to be the killer involved with numerous other backwoods murders throughout the Southeast. This one's going to be a long story, and is going to involve a lot of non-consensual content, but it will be the last story. My stepfather. He's my mom's third husband. Mom met him at a bar, a country bar she used to go dancing at, and saw him there for a while before deciding to introduce him to her kids. He took us all out to dinner that night, and we had a relatively good time. Then we all went back to the house. We weren't home long before I heard him and my mom giggling in the hallway, and suddenly I just felt sick. I was about 12 at the time, by the way. I'm not sure what it was, but suddenly I just hated this guy. My mom asked what was wrong, and I just said I didn't feel good and went to my room. Imagine the surprise of all of us kids when we woke up to see that this guy was still there. He moved in that very night. I tried to make the best of a bad situation, though I avoided him for some time. No more than a week later, he offers to brush my hair for me. We're all in the living room watching TV. I'm hesitant at first, but my mom encourages me. Apparently he had sisters and knew how to brush girls' hair. I kept my hair about waist length back then, and it was a pain to get the knots out, so I caved and let him brush my hair. He just brushed it, no big deal. So when he offered other times, I let him. Then one day, he offered while no one was there. Because my hair was so long, why don't I sit up on the edge of the chair in front of him? Oh, hey, would you like a back rub? I rub your mom's back all the time. I should mention this wasn't my first interaction with the perv, and I actually was very bothered just by being that close to someone. I hated being touched back then, but because everyone obviously liked this guy, I told myself I shouldn't cause any problems. Next thing I know, he says, "Can I rub down a little further? In front? It's your decision. You're completely in charge here." Thank God I had the courage to say no. I avoided him for ages after that and didn't have the sense to tell my mom or my brothers. This guy proceeds to find ways to get both of my older brothers out of the house by the time I'm 15. He goes long periods of time, seeming to be a perfectly good guy, and then out of nowhere hits me with something pervy and horrid. Sophomore year comes up and we get our class rings. Well, these rings are not cheap, and we've always been fairly poor. My mom says I have to ask Jerk, name changed, not so obviously, for the money. I ask him to buy my class ring, and he says, "What's in it for me?" I go silent. My mom is right there. She innocently says, "She can bake you a cake." I'm good at baking. He's quiet for a while and has to think it through. Then he says, "Okay, but there are rules." I forget what all the rules were, stupid stuff mostly. But his final rule was, if you lose this ring, you get naked. What? This is an expensive ring. It's a lot of money, so you better not lose it or you get naked for me. My mom tells him to stop, but only half-heartedly. When I try to talk to her about it later, she says, "Well, I guess you better not lose it." At that point, I kind of figured I couldn't count on my mom for help. Over the years, I've learned she was messed with a lot when she was younger and has convinced herself that all men are this way. I love my mom to death, but it kills me that she believes this. He's never stopped being a total jerk. I lived with them until I was 20. I was very shy, and having a job was very hard for me. I tried moving in with my oldest brother to help him take care of his kid, but after 3 months I was asking to come home and once again got the "what's in it for me" response. I got to hear all about how he'd lived the past few years just for me and mom, bought us a house and everything, and how ungrateful I was. I came back to what was essentially a prison. I had my nephew with me at first, as my brother was going to give my mom custody of him. That is, until my stepdad got mad at him and kicked him hard. A 3-year-old little boy who hadn't done anything more than annoy him, probably by making noise. So mom calls up my brother and tells him to come get him because she's afraid to have him around my stepfather. Then, once he's gone, she convinces herself that he never did that. Finally, I met my first boyfriend. By this time, I'm 20. I had gotten 2 part-time jobs and he worked at one of them. I was hanging out at his house a lot and my stepdad got jealous. He decided to give me a curfew of midnight and said if I break it, then I'm out of the house and can't ever come back unless I sleep with him because he knows I can't be a virgin anymore. I was, so there was no excuse now. I cried to my boyfriend, and he told me I could come live with him. This was after we'd only been seeing each other for about 3 weeks. That night, I didn't go home. My stepfather called me and screamed, called me stupid, and I screamed back and told him how he'd made my life a living hell. An hour later, he and Mom pull up with his truck full of all my stuff that he could put in it. He took my car because it was Mom's and dumped my stuff right there, telling my boyfriend I was his problem now. I will never forget the smirk on my mom's face when she hugged me and I apologized for everything. She said she wasn't mad at me at all, but was proud. Apparently, I'd had the guts to do what she couldn't. Of course, not long after I left, he finally proposed to her and they got married. It's screwed up to realize that the reason your stepfather didn't marry your mom is because he wanted a shot at you first. Anyway, this is way longer than I meant it to be, but the point is that everyone who meets this jerk loves him. They don't know who he is, just that he's personable and relatively smart. But I never forget that first night when for no apparent reason, I just felt sick at the thought of him. Edit. There was an update post somewhere in the comments. It was too long for me to post here, so I just did it as a reply. The TLDR is, no, I'm not with that boyfriend anymore, but we were together 7 years. Yes, Mom is still with this jerk, but I never see him. She's afraid to leave him, but now that it's just the two of them, she sees it as her being the only one who has to tolerate his crap, and she's willing to do that for what she sees as financial security. She visits by herself, and no one questions why we don't go visiting there. Reddit, what did your parents teach you that you had to unlearn? Well, my grandpa told me that soda evaporates quickly, as in half the can in 20 minutes, when I was around 6. Took me like 10 years to realize he's been drinking my soda when my back is turned. I always drank my soda fast when outside or in hot places because of it. Wanting anything is selfish. Learning to undo this train of thought is the greatest feat of my life. It's still hard for me to attempt for first place in any form of competition. I always feel that someone else is more deserving, so I don't give it my all. If I do win, I'm always certain it was a fluke. This applies to my relationships in the worst way, too. I have a hard time dating because I'm convinced that if I date them, I would be taking them off the market and someone more deserving would be losing out. Or how I have a strong desire to be dominant in the bedroom, but I'm constantly guilting myself for wanting these things, so I either submit or beat around the bush. It doesn't matter what I want. I am undeserving, and to achieve is selfish and wrong. Screw that thought process. My mother told me that I had another middle name one day, Aloysius. I hated it, of course, but eventually came to terms with the idea. It was years later that she realized I had been writing an extra middle name on literally everything that required my full name, and asked me why I was doing such an odd thing. She had forgotten what she had done. When I told her, she laughed at me for about an hour straight, tears rolling down her face, laughing so hard she peed herself. Yeah, thanks. She taught me capsicum seeds were poisonous. They aren't. She really believes this one, though. Edit, yeah, I misspelled the name. You should have seen how I spelled it when I was 7. My grandfather thought it was hilarious to threaten me with renaming. He swore he would get my dad to change my name to Wolfgang Helmut IV if I misbehaved. I believed it wholeheartedly. Nobody in my family was ever named Wolfgang Helmut, and I am female. Could you imagine introducing yourself like that to people, though? You would have every right to put on the worst British accent you could and go, "Yes, hello, my name is Wolfgang Helmut IV. Charmed to meet you." My mother is convinced all clothes are too tight unless they are falling off of you. I looked like a ragamuffin for years until my rich sister-in-law pulled me aside and went, "Sweetie, I'm gonna take you shopping before you ever have to attend any job interviews looking like that." What food tastes like. Chicken is not supposed to be tough, dry, and chewy. Steak is not usually chewy, flat, and gray. There are more seasonings available than salt and pepper. Once I taught myself to cook, the world just opened up with new flavors and foods. It was the best. I personally resonate with this one because I love cooking and I wanted to broaden my horizons beyond just Southern American food where I grew up and eating out of a paper bag every weekend as a treat. Once you open that door to a new culinary world, trust me, you'll want to try everything. To be a bystander, for lack of a better term, my parents are very against me standing up for others and even myself in some cases, and I had to learn that standing up for other people is the right thing to do. Also, how to pronounce cucumbers. For those of you wondering, they pronounced it cucumbers. Quantity over quality. Though my family was economically stable, privileged even, my parents grew up in poverty. So their way of buying was to buy cheap, which definitely should be taken into consideration, but ultimately, if the quality is not there, you end up spending more to continuously replace the item. We could afford to buy things of better quality that would last longer, but that's just not how they grew up. It still hurts me to spill $60 on a nice pair of shoes that will last more than a year, but I have since learned that I would much rather spend $60 this one time rather than getting 3 pairs of $20 crappy no-brand shoes that hurt my feet and fall apart every few months. That the garbage disposal will not trigger a nuclear reaction and blow up half the world within 5 seconds of being turned on without cold water running. That was a tough one to unlearn. I don't know, man. The way my dog reacts to it, I think it's gonna blow up. That you don't have to marry everyone you date. My mom was married 7 times and taught us that you never left anyone, no matter if they were horrible to you, took all your money, and treated your kids like crap, and that you could, quote, fix them if you married them. It took me a moving out and talking with other people to learn that is not normal and people break up all the time. Luckily, I never married any of those guys. They taught me to never disagree with anything. In my household, there was no such thing as no or why. Whoa, didn't expect this much of a response from the Reddit community. Thanks for the gold, strangers. I'm glad a lot of you are starting to be able to get over this bad programming and speak up if you disagree with something. Most parents want the best for you, and they do try their best, but they don't get everything right. Pretty much the same. My dad was abusive, and we all sort of just agreed with everything, because disagreeing or questioning anything led to yelling and throwing things and tantrums that lasted days. I grew up learning that the safest way to live was entirely unnoticed. So it took forever, even after I was an adult, for me to speak up, make my own choices, or do things I actually wanted to do. I still struggle with it a lot. That you should never do anything for others because nobody will do anything for you. I understand because my mom came from a very rough household growing up, but it was frustrating whenever she found out I bought lunch for my friends or gave someone a ride. It would always be the, nobody will look out for you, why do the same? That anger doesn't have to be the default reaction to anything you don't like. Someone has a different opinion, they're telling you you're wrong and stupid and you should be ticked. Someone makes an offhand comment that struck you the wrong way, they're jerks, you should be angry. Anything, anytime, anywhere happened that you didn't like for any reason, be angry. No thanks. It makes for a crappy life. Edit, wow you guys, I'm glad that this is something positive for everyone, and a lot of people have asked how to do this, for themselves or others. So instead of trying to reply to everyone, I'll give the short-ish answer here. First, realize that being angry at everything is going to make life pretty horrible. Then, it's just reminding yourself every time you have that gut reaction to ask yourself if it's worth it or not. 9 times out of 10, it's not. If it's situational, try and make the best of it as best you can, depending on the situation, obviously. If it's personal, try to see the other person's perspective. If they're just being a jerk, think of something you're going to enjoy doing later, smile, and wish them a great screw-off while you go about your day, because jerks aren't worth your emotional effort of being angry. I just want to add that minor inconveniences don't equal the end of the world. My mom does this thing where if eggs or whatever at the grocery store are really high due to inflation or high demand, she makes a big deal out of it and complains the whole time we're shopping. Like, I get it, stuff is expensive, but you're already buying 20 other things. You can wait on the eggs, Mom. My dad thought it was funny to teach my sister, brother, and I the wrong names to things. Sister confuses plates and bowls, brother confuses forks and spoons, I get confused with beetroot and capsicum. I get it right. Most of the time now. My mom is obsessively clean. It took me a couple years into my marriage to stop cleaning to her standards. I'm not a dirty person, but I don't have a fit about a little dust on the baseboards. She should see my carpet right now. I've been sewing. There are scraps and threads all over. she'd twitch. Cooking chicken. Until college, I thought that chicken was supposed to be dry. I hated it. My buddy cooked me chicken parmesan, and it was the best chicken I ever had. Turkey for me. I felt like a traitor to my family when I had Thanksgiving dinner with friends, and the turkey was better than I can ever remember my mom making, and she prides herself on her cooking. She was outdone by a guy a third of her age who was probably drunk for most of the cooking. I felt even more guilty taking my kids, both teenagers, there next time. We still do family Thanksgiving, but the three of us feel a little guilty about having more fun with 20 to 30 people crammed into a tiny apartment, most of them drinking and playing Cards Against Humanity and eating off of paper plates, than we do at a nice quiet table following all the traditions we followed forever. This is another one that hit home for me. When I was in college, I really started coming out of my shell as a human being and realizing that you can make friends and talk to them outside of class. It's because I'd always been pretty terminally online, so I wasn't really good at making friends. So having the chance to hang out with them, make and eat food with them, and play dumb party games with them, it was like I had found a new family. I like to reference the full quote, because people know this as blood is thicker than water, but it's actually blood of the covenant is thicker than water of the womb. Not to diss on anybody who's really close with their family, but sometimes having friends is your family. 10 out of 10 would recommend having friends. That just because someone is older than me doesn't mean that they know more than me. Yes, it's true that I don't have as much experience or knowledge about things in the world, but it is possible for me to know something that someone who is older than me doesn't know. My dad always used the "I'm older/wiser/more experienced" line if I said something, a fact or piece of information that he didn't agree with or think was true. It made me feel a little insecure about what I know and if what I know is right or not. My mom taught me that I had to respect my elders, even if they were possibly wrong because they were older and wiser. My dad, on the other hand, sat me down one day and said, "Son, people are stupid. Just because they are older doesn't mean they know crap from apple butter. I don't care how old they are. If they don't know their butt from a hole in the ground, it's okay to call them dumb. You're going to run into people who are smarter than you, but you're also going to run into people who will make you wonder just how in the world they manage to not drown themselves while taking a pee in the morning. You can know a lot, or you can know a little. A smart man knows that he doesn't know everything. He also knows the value of common sense." That I'm not done eating until the plate is clear. I think my parents had a really good system for this. When each of us kids reached an appropriate age, we were to serve ourselves and had to clear our plates. We quickly learned how to portion meals appropriate to our individual sizes and appetites. All things political. My mother's side of the family is a constant cycle of choosing the opposite side of the political spectrum to spite one's parents, not for any actual political reasons. That I'm responsible for everyone else's feelings. My parents are narcissists, and if they were ever in a bad mood, it was because of something I did. I've spent my whole life managing their emotions. Learning what sets them off, learning the subtle triggers, making sure you don't ever step out of line or say something that they might misinterpret or take too personally. And not just with them. I had to do that with everyone so that I will be a, quote, good kid and not make other people angry, because being a, quote, bad kid would reflect very poorly on them, and we can't have that. I now know that other people's emotions aren't my freaking problem, but I still feel responsible for my parents. It's tough. Korean fan death. For those who don't know about this, Korean people believe that if you sleep with the fan on with all windows and door closed, you will die. Still can't convince my parents that this is a myth. So I will be super dead? I've slept with the fan on since I got hamsters 8 years ago. They are long gone and I haven't gone back. I can't sleep in total silence now. Edit. My most upvoted comment by far. And to answer why, it was because those little jerks had a squeaky wheel that they only used at night, on top of general rustling. Anyway, one of them killed the other, so the survivor was cast out into the wilderness many years ago. No, nobody believes me when I say this. It's always hamsters that die the weirdest deaths. I swear to God, you can't go 5 minutes without someone telling a hamster story, and they end it with like, "Oh, I boiled my hamster alive because he crawled into the pot while I was making mac and cheese." It's never a natural death. You never hear about a hamster growing old and dying naturally. It's always really, really weird. I do not have to say sorry for everything. I used to say I'm sorry for everything. Reached for the same cookie? Sorry. We had different opinions and you're frustrated? Sorry. Didn't grab the right bag of groceries out of the truck? Sorry. I said sorry for everything. Even when cashiers didn't have nickels to give me back a change, I apologized for me causing them that inconvenience. Unlearning that is still a struggle at times. It's times like this I'm reminded of a wise man. Do not be sorry. Be better. Thank you, Kratos, God of War. That loud noises and roughhousing caused the cake to not rise when baking in the oven. Come to find out 20 years later, it was just a lie to get us to be quiet. Now that I think of it, they got quiet kids and cake. Scratch that, I'll remember this instead and use it in the future. That it's okay to want affection, and that it's not normal to be surrounded by fighting all the time. That I'm not a special snowflake. Being, quote, smart and talented stopped mattering around age 17, and it felt like a fraudulent cut-up until I learned how to work and apply myself. Shoutouts to all my gifted and talented kids with severe depression and anxiety, let's go! How to money. They never dealt with credit cards, student loans, etc. What they taught me was superficial, and some of their strategies put me deeper into debt. Took years, but dug out. My credit is great, and I'm actively saving every month. To always assume the worst might happen. My parents are conservative in every way, shape, and form. Like, no, Mom, just because I'm out having a good time with my friends and don't answer my phone doesn't mean that I'm dead. Now that I'm 100% independent, I'm learning that sometimes risk equals reward, whereas my parents had taught my siblings and I that risk usually leads to demise. I feel like I have to say sorry for all my commentary, but I really have a lot to say in this one. When I told my parents I wanted to go to a convention in another state with some online friends, my dad freaked and said that I would get trafficked. Like, there's a certain amount of risk that comes with flying in an airplane, being around people you never met in person, and being in a city, but you should expect your 24-year-old son to be a little more aware of what's happening than you think he is. By the way, had a fantastic time, and I'm going to another one with the same friends here in a few months. That men should be busy doing manly stuff, and that taking care of / entertaining the kids is women's work. Screw that. I hang out and do stuff with my kids every chance I get. What's the point of having them if you don't want to spend time with them? That you can always do better. Not that that's intrinsically bad, but when you don't learn to stop and appreciate what you've accomplished, you'll never be satisfied. Eat crappy. We never ate vegetables. Always starches and crap. So much processed BS. I'm 28 and finally have managed to restrain my palate to eat vegetables regularly. I do my best to eat plenty of veggies every day of all different types, and I'm very concerned with my health and fitness. Passing this on to my son is super important to me. All the time she called me a spoiled brat when I cried because we were eating ramen every night and I had no clothes to wear to school and problems with my lungs because the crappy house we were in had black mold, but we could somehow magically afford $60 to $80 of liquor for her boyfriend every week. That's some crap I am still unlearning. The bit I'm unlearning is that it's okay to voice your unhappiness. You are not spoiled for wanting decent living conditions. It's okay to accept gifts / help from other people. It does not make you a bad person and does not mean you are using them. Not accepting that my daughter is truly sorry for what she's done until she cries. When we were kids, if my sister or I broke the rules, we would get the wrath of dad come down on us. Anything besides ending up crying was disrespect or not taking the telling off seriously. My dad is from the Pacific Islands. Not that this in any way excuses him, but it's what he was taught. Children are disrespectful, parents are there to put a stop to it. I've caught myself early on, and I'm learning to turn myself around. Anger management, parenting courses. But I can hear my dad coming through sometimes, and it frightens me. I'm trying to stop the cycle. I can feel the irrational anger starting to come out if I'm telling our girl off and she just dismisses me. But I make it a point to be the adult in the situation and remember that it's her age and that she's learning. Side note, he's since changed a lot and is a fantastic and doting grandfather. I just don't want to carry on traits that I grew up with from his earlier years. When someone annoys you, cut them out of your life, permanently. Don't do this. Like, obviously, this is on a post where you're meant to unlearn what you've been told. In a real-life scenario, it's worth working out what annoys you most of the time. Because most people are going to know how to apologize and not do that annoying thing again. You just got to be simple and upfront without bashing them. But if you're online and somebody is bothering you, the block button is right there, especially if they're talking to you about some BS that you don't care about and they've just messaged you on Twitter for the first time. Okay, when I was a toddler, my dad used to play this game with this rhyme, where he'd recite 4-acre, eye blinker, nose stopper, chin bopper. Poked my forehead, the spot between my eyes, the tip of my nose, and then my chin. And then like a year or so later, my mom and I were in the car and I said something like, "Mom, my 4-acre hurts." And she looked at me and was like, "Honey, that's your forehead." I looked back at her like she was insane and argued with her. "No, it's my 4-acre. And she had to answer me back, "No, sweetie, it's your forehead, really." And I argued the point with her for half a minute before I realized that all this time I had been convinced that my forehead was actually called my 4-acre. Let's end this on a long one. They instilled in me that all I had to do was go to college and get through it, and then I'd get, quote, my job that would pay $60,000 with benefits, and then I'd work there until I retired, didn't matter what I studied or if I networked or pursued extracurriculars. Just finish school and you get your job. When that didn't work, put in more applications. I graduated in 2008 when there was no economy, with a useless degree and no extracurriculars or internships, and a GPA that was too crappy to even consider grad school. I've spent the last 8 years figuring out that this is now a hustler's economy, and you don't make money by applying to places and sending out your resume unless you're looking for a $9 an hour job at a sandwich shop. You have to develop actual skills, be good at BSing, talk to people, keep your eyes and options open, be willing to expand your skill set, keep an eye on what skills are marketable, not be afraid to jump into something just because you've never done it before, realize that employer loyalty is a two-way street that is permanently closed and has been for years, etc. Every good job I've ever had has come from a lead that a friend has given me. None of them have come from shotgunning my resume to every pyramid scheme in the Craigslist classifieds. Basically, I had to learn this entire skill set and mindset that was completely alien to me, and unlearn the notion that you just step off the graduation stage with your bachelor's in English and start courting job offers from all the places that are eager to hire a guy whose main selling point is that he's literate, like extra literate. What's something that's common knowledge in your workplace that will be mind-blowing to the rest of us? Disclaimer, this thread was made 11 years ago. Please use discretion if you decide to follow any advice given in these responses. There's a good chance that it's incredibly outdated by now. With that being said, let's move on to the video. For example, I'm not in law enforcement, but I learned that special units such as SWAT are just normal cops during the day, giving out speeding tickets and breaking up parties, contrary to my imagination where they sat around waiting for a bank robbery to happen. The fajitas at Chili's aren't actually sizzling. They have a sauce called, quote, sizzle sauce that you spray over the hot food so it gives the illusion that it is sizzling. When you have an IV placed, there isn't actually a needle left in your arm. The needle is taken out and a tiny, flexible plastic tube is left in. So many people think that they are walking around with a needle in their arm and are afraid to move it around. Chemistry grad student. Safety regulations happen when EPA inspectors come by, not any time else. Casino dealers are not out to take your money. We live off tips. We want you to win. Strawberries are picked by hand. It sucks. 2/3 of Staples' annual profits occur during the 2 to 4 week period of back-to-school shopping. Technical writer. Lots of people work really hard to write all those electronics manuals that you don't read. Also, manuals are considered legal documents. If a client injures themselves following a set of bad instructions, the company can be held accountable. If you're going to the dentist to get work done, fillings, crowns, etc., and you use cocaine, tell your dentist. Cocaine use, within the 24 hours or even more, plus dental work equals medical emergencies and often death. So, moral of the story, don't do coke and then get a filling. Or just don't do coke in general. I feel like telling people not to do hard drugs is pretty good advice. If you knew just how much money was dumped down the drain in emergency medical services for non-emergent calls and straight up BS, your head would explode. I work in a rural system, and I've seen people burn more money in a year than they would ever make in their entire lives on EMS that they aren't paying for. This is for routine or made-up stuff. I just remembered this from my days as a car salesman, and I have never been happier from being fired from a job than the day my sales manager said, "You're a good guy, but this isn't going to work out." To see how much that used car really is, look for a sticker. Ours were red on the windshield and look for a number. Example 191377499. The first and the last two numbers are the model year. The numbers in the middle is the price that the dealership sets. Anything above that is going to be commission for the salesman. Haggle accordingly. If you make a lane change on the highway and cut close in front of my big rig, you aren't making me mad. You are scaring the crap out of me. Because if you blow a tire or if anything else causes you to sharply lose speed at that moment, I will roll over you like a 40-ton avalanche and they will have to wash you and your children out of the wreckage with a hose. I work as a barista during the school year. One thing that a lot of our customers don't seem to know is that the dark roast coffee actually has the lowest amount of caffeine on the roast spectrum. So many night shift workers will come in right before we close and ask for the darkest roast we have because they need to stay up all night. We always correct them and assure them that our lightest roast has the most caffeine. I think people assume that dark roast has more because it has a stronger coffee taste. So they think that a stronger coffee taste equals more beans used to make it equals more caffeine. Not quite. We used 80 grams of beans, no matter the roast, to make around 2.3 liters of coffee. At the shop where I worked, I'm sure this is the same for many other coffee shops as well, dark roast coffee and light roast coffee are made from the same beans. Dark roast coffee, as the name implies, is roasted the longest. The beans get that bitter and burnt taste, but more caffeine is burned off in the process. Since light roast is not processed for as long, more caffeine actually stays in the coffee beans. TLDR, if you need to stay up all night, light roast coffee has the most caffeine. Geneticist here. It is estimated that about 10% of children in genetic studies are, quote, non-paternities, meaning 10% of the kids in the studies don't have the same biological father as we are told they have. Edit, wanted to clarify some things. This could happen when children aren't informed a sperm donor was used, the children didn't know they were adopted, or some other mix-up. The 10% comes from genetic disease studies, not just paternity testing. The 10% figure is often quoted in scientific articles, but some studies have been published which suggest the 10% figure is an overestimate. While it is not possible with current technology to revive large organisms that have been cryogenically frozen, it is entirely possible to revive cells that have been cryopreserved. It gets cooler. We can store cells in a deep freeze state about -200 Celsius and bring them back years later. The cells will thaw, grow, reproduce, and continue on their respective merry ways as if nothing out of the ordinary ever happened. Edit, woke up to a bunch of replies, so I'll clarify some of the top questions. Number 1. Why don't the cells burst? We use a cryoprotectant before we freeze down the cells. This prevents the water in the cells from crystallizing when it freezes. We stick the cells in special vials and put the vials in this temperature-regulating chamber that looks something like a large revolver chamber. This slows the freezing process to an acceptable rate. Once the cells reach -80 degrees Celsius, they are taken out of the regulating chamber and transferred to -200 degrees Celsius. Number 2. What's preventing you from scaling this up to animals? Or humans? Let me preface this answer with the disclaimer. I am not a cryogenicist. Part of my job involves storing cell lines in cryogenic states. That being said, the biggest obstacle to overcome if we were to revive frozen people would be the brain. Cells don't have brains. Cells don't even have organs. You may argue from high school biology that they have organelles, but that's not the same thing. Cells are essentially macromolecular machines. You can leave your car sitting in the driveway unattended for a couple years, and it will still run when you come back. Might need a jump or an oil change, but the analogy holds. Number 3. What cells are we talking about here? Malignant ones. Various assortments of cancer cell lines. They tend to grow a bit faster than their non-malignant counterparts, and, quote, recover from freezing faster. But both malignant and non-malignant cells will recover and grow after freezing. The throttle of go-karts is located just above the motor and can make your cart anywhere from 5 to 10 miles per hour faster. I've worked at multiple retirement homes. The senior citizen residents hook up with each other quite frequently. I work with children. In regards to potty training, kids are more likely to be able to go if their feet are on a flat surface. If you don't have a potty chair for them, give them a step stool or a box or something so their feet don't dangle. Helicopter auto-rotation is something designed for and tested during helicopter development. The Helo is able to perform various maneuvers, fly forward at X speed, turn left/right at X speed, Y bank angle, etc., without engine power. Helicopter pilots routinely practice these, and not just pray the aircraft comes to the ground softly if power is lost. The reason a lot of military units have massive budgets is because the defense funding system works on a use-it-or-lose-it system. We may not need our full budget one year, but we're a deploying unit that is deploying next year and will need it then. If we don't spend it all by September 1st, the fiscal year starts October 1st. When the new budget comes out, we will have reduced funds. So units frequently spend all the money they are allotted in order to have guaranteed funding for when they need it. If the system didn't punish units for being frugal and made it easy to acquire funds needed for training and equipment, we could reduce spending quite a bit most of the time. 90% of professional brewing is cleaning things. Beer is simple and a naturally occurring substance. We just make it easier for the yeast to do their job by monitoring temperatures, anticipating problems, and cleaning. It's honestly hard to add to this thread. It's common knowledge where I work. For instance, opening a tank of fermenting beer to quote, see how it's going will probably make you pass out from CO2 inhalation and worst case, kill you. We frequently get drunk college students on tours asking if they can go inside a tank of beer. No, you will die. Also, we don't spend all day drinking beer and looking at samples. Mostly, it's lifting heavy stuff, cleaning, getting dirty, moving heavy stuff, and did I mention cleaning? Content warning, animal death. From working at a kennel, a lot of places only have a few sizes for coffins should you want the kennel to bury your deceased pet for you. If your pet is too big to fit one, he/she will be made to fit in it. Working at a few vets, I have no idea how common knowledge this is, but I had no idea until I worked there. But if you see an injured animal on the side of the road that isn't yours, you can bring it into most places and they will treat the animal at no cost to you. If the animal dies, it will also be buried at no cost to you. Good Samaritan laws or something like that. If your animal has gotten into illegal drugs, just tell us. We don't care. Our business is treating your animal appropriately as fast as possible. Just freaking tell us. It will save you money in the long run since we don't need to go through so many wild diagnostic measures, and your poor balls-tripping pet can get its system cleared before anything too bad happens. If your cat is in for treatment and bites one of us and has not had or is overdue for its rabies vaccine, the animal will be contained after the bite, and if it shows symptoms, it will then be euthanized and put down. This is purely personal, but if your pet is at a certain elderly age, 12 plus, and having major issues, please just consider euthanization. The amount of money you'll spend on the insane amount of treatments to keep your pet alive for another few months is not worth it, and the amount of suffering the animal endures from all the treatments is also not worth it. So many animals come in that would really be better off going peacefully into the bright light, but owners just can't let go. It's frustrating to watch. Most private colleges, especially those with high endowments and a considerable amount of prestige, will send a list of each year's applicants to their communications/development office. They'll research the kids and their families and give them a rating based on the potential the kid has to add to the endowment, basically an assessment of family wealth/potential. This is used more to distinguish between the multitude of wealthy kids who apply to such colleges. If you're poor, most schools will see that as added diversity and will help your chances at acceptance. I worked in a cardboard factory for a while, taking huge rolls of paper and gluing/baking them into cardboard sheets, boxes, etc. That warm, delicious smell that comes from your closed takeaway pizza as you drive home, it's mostly not the pizza. It's the sugar, starch, and animal fat in the cardboard and glue. The cardboard factory smelled exactly like takeaway pizza. Former prison guard here. Most inmates do not have access to weights more than 2 to 4 times per month, and only if they've earned it with good behavior. The going rate for cigarettes on the prison black market is $100 a box. If you are willing to go a few years without any friends, and you have about $100 a month of expendable income, depending on your crime, you can go your entire sentence without being in a fight or joining a gang. Non-consensual penetration happens in prison, but it isn't nearly as common as it was 30 years ago. Inmates have an anonymous hotline they can call if they want to report, and now there are cameras almost everywhere except for cells. That's where most penetration happens, and there's not a lot prison guards can do to stop it. 95% of what you see in prison TV shows or movies is creative thinking. Your first day in prison, I do not recommend picking a fight with the biggest, toughest looking guy in prison, or fighting with the first person who's a jerk to you. It won't make you look tough. More likely, you'll just go to seg for a few weeks before getting kicked out into a new unit, where you'll have to do it all over again. Instead, find out who is in charge of your race. If you're white, it'll probably be Aryan Brotherhood or Peckerwood. Then either join up or ask how much it costs to be protected. This is called paying rent. You won't make any friends paying rent, so plan on reading a lot. If you don't have the money or the desire to be extorted, you can join the gang. I wouldn't recommend this unless you're going to be down for a long time. You'll start out on the bottom of the prison gang hierarchy. After initial training period of working out, you'll be asked to do hits on enemies of the gang. The shot callers will tell you who and when you'll be attacking, and you'll be expected to follow through. The problem with this is that you'll likely be given additional time on your sentence, so if your goal is to get out of prison, this isn't the recommended route. Plus, you'll be required to get gang tattoos, which will make it difficult to live normally after prison, and are often accompanied with hepatitis C, HIV, and tuberculosis. It depends on the state, but guards in the towers are carrying weapons with live ammunition. Prison guards tend to be rednecks with fairly good aim. If you're going to kick someone's butt, don't do it in the yard. If you are perceived by a tower guard as putting someone in a position of substantial bodily harm or risk of life, you will be killed. Perimeter towers are also armed with live ammunition. If you are going to try to escape, your best bet is tunneling out or stealing a guard uniform or impersonating a staff member, etc. Over the fence will probably get you shot, unless you have friends who have bribed the guard in the tower. If you're in for anything inappropriate, you're gonna have a bad time. TLDR, don't go to prison. It sucks. Wendy's actually cracks and cooks a fresh egg every time you order a breakfast sandwich, and the chili does not come out of a can. Yeah. I see you, Wendy. I see you commenting on that Reddit post. You're not fooling anyone, pigtails. Lie to me all you want, but we know that fresh, never frozen beef is a cover-up. What next? You gonna tell us you raise chickens in the back? You have a garden where all your vegetables come from? Does Wendy herself slaughter the cow? I've got my eye on you, pigtails. This war ain't over. And now it's time for the men of Reddit to leave the room because this might make you cross your legs. When a urinary catheter is placed, a tiny balloon is then filled inside the bladder so the catheter stays in place and doesn't, quote, slip out. If a catheter is pulled out before the balloon is deflated, it shreds the urethra and is a bloody mess. Don't ever pull out your catheter. Ever. Update, another fun fact about catheters. For men, it is best for them to be hard. It makes placing the catheter a lot easier. So if a nurse has ever said thank you while placing a catheter in your semi-erect dingling, you know why. Failing a student is absolute agony for most professors. We will often look for any loophole we can find to let you pass the class, because frankly, having to tell you that you're failing is one of the worst things we will have to do for our job all year. We think about you when we turn in our grades, and we torture ourselves about it afterward. Unless your professor is truly a jerkwad, when you fail a class, you have legitimately failed that class. P.S. Grading papers takes a really long time. Coca-Cola employee here. Fun fact, that crisp, sharp smell that Coca-Cola and Diet Coke give off, strictly phosphoric acid. When I worked at AMC, we don't clean the theaters after every movie. We just sweep the popcorn under the seats, try to pick up all the big trash, and put all the armrests down. Cinemark is much more demanding. Every kernel of popcorn must be eliminated. I worked at an optometrist's office for about 2 years and sold glasses. We sold more high-end stuff, but had basically everything. What some people don't realize is that if your prescription is really strong, you should shell out the extra money for the better lens material and maybe for that anti-reflective coating. It will make a huge difference in clarity, especially if you drive at night. If you have a really low prescription, screw it, get the cheap lenses, you won't notice. Also, if you wear contacts, freaking give your eyes a break every now and then. If you wear them from the moment you wake up until right before you go to bed, your eyesight will get way worse way faster. You risk serious infection, and you're kind of suffocating your eyes. Even if you have the kind that you can wear for 30 days straight, you sure as heck better have at least one pair of crappy glasses you can wear if you ever tear a lens into your eye or lose/run out of contacts. Healthcare worker. If we have to phone a patient at home and someone else answers, we are not allowed to identify where we are calling from or why. So, say we need to ring John Q. Citizen and his wife answers. Then we can only say, "May I speak to John Citizen, please?" Wife will ask who it is. Our name. Wife will ask, "Where are you from?" Or, "Why do you need to speak to John?" "I can't discuss that with you. Could you please put John on the phone?" Etc., etc. It causes so many issues. We would love to just say I'm calling about his blood test, but we are legally not allowed to do so. I'm not being obstructionist or rude. Please just suck it up and pass the phone over. When you visit a single page of Amazon.com, or pretty much any large-scale website, no less than 30 computers put the page together. We're talking servers that have sub-millisecond round-trip times between nodes. When they reboot, it takes an hour to refill the cache, so all results from those machines are discarded until 99.9% of the results are instant. At Outback Steakhouse, they will prepare your food however the heck you want. They'll put your sirloin in a blender if you want. Get creative. Edit, I think Outback owes me a gift card or something for all this free advertising I just gave them. I can confirm this. I once ordered a BLT, which isn't on the menu, at Outback Steakhouse, and my waiter asked me what I wanted on it. I was dumbfounded. I'm just a cashier and don't have the power/authority/ability to do most of what you want or expect me to do. I'm gonna end this on an extremely long, extremely unnecessary Inkjet cartridge rant. I work for a major ink and toner remanufacturer. Guys, really, just stop goddamn printing stupid stuff. You don't need it. You are getting raked over the coals, even by me selling remans to you at 40% off. A 5,000 milliliter bottle of our most common ink costs us $120. HP 60s are our most common cartridge. They will only hold 6 milliliters. 6! We sell them for $10. Also, those cartridges are garbage. For the love of everything you find holy, stop buying HP's junk. They are made to fail to make my job harder, and since they fail on the consumer too, they just make their lives harder. Why keep giving money to a company that is actively malicious towards you? Buying an inkjet printer that is an ink tank style system will save you countless dollars and headaches, if it is a Canon or Brother. Lexmark and Epson are made to self-destruct, and are also less cost-effective than Brother or Canon. These new HP 950/951s self-destruct. The 564, 920, 940 didn't, but HP made those all to be miserable to operate when using remans. For many integrated printhead carts, or drums in the case of the toners, you pay a premium to replace the printhead each time when you don't need to. HP 21, 27, or 56 carts have a page counter on them of somewhere around 2,200 to 2,500 pages. I've had older 56s stop working for customers due to the page counter before the printhead wore out. My test machine doesn't check the page counter, so it could give me a perfect print, but the actual printer will check the counter. Also, in those 21, 27, 56 cartridges, HP changed the composition of the ink to where it pretty much destroys the printhead. These make my job miserable at times, but I have worked it out to have about an 80% success rate on them now. Lexmark, Epson, and HP, and Kodak, but I'll have self-destructing cartridges. Epson for a while had self-destructing printers. Lexmark also installs a process called LexBCE that makes your print spooler dependent on it. Good luck. Lexmark are the highest cost to operate printers by far, the least reliable/lowest quality, and the most scummy company out of the bunch. Brother are generally the least expensive and have the least issues because they keep things simple. An inexpensive to operate Brother will suit most any home consumer's needs. I am not being paid by Brother. I just like that they are the least crappy to the consumer. Honestly, the only time I recommend something other than Brother is when my customer wants to print photos. Then I recommend a Canon ink tank style system. The current generation are the PGI 225/CLI 226, and they are good little cartridges, and I have sold hundreds, and can count the chip failures on one hand with fingers to spare, and even those shocked me. Now please Canon, don't make me look like a fool. If you can find an old HP printer that took the 45 or 78 cartridges at Goodwill or wherever for cheap, it's probably worth the investment to grab it. Yes, the 60s are quote cheaper, but the 45's OEM are about 35 for 42 milliliters of ink, where the 60s are about 15 for 6 milliliters. You are getting conned hard on quote cheap ink. I'm looking at you too, Kodak. Lexmark and HP send out firmware updates without your knowledge that disable your ability to use aftermarket products that are entirely legal to use. Remands are, counterfeits are not. I'm sure it mentions it in that EULA you didn't read. My job is far, far more complicated than just shoot some ink into it, no matter what those stupid advertisements from HP claimed. Everything gets electronically tested, cleaned thoroughly, tested again, filed under vacuum, and tested again. Quote, just shooting ink into it works about 1% of the time if the cartridge just ran out of ink. When I tell you I need your empties back to keep up my stock, I mean it. I'm not trying to screw you out of your little Office Max rewards. I need your empties back to do my freaking job. Finally, one of my good friends works at a big box office supply store. Stop grousing to these people about the cost of ink. There was almost no markup on it whatsoever at the retail level. If you're paying $40 for a stinking 12 milliliter Lexmark 16 at Staples, Staples probably spent $39 on it. Some of this, while mundane to me now, elicits a response from my customers, so hopefully it fits into the discussion. TLDR, I know way too freaking much about inkjet cartridges. What is your best met the high school jerk/bully as an adult story? I own my own gym and have for a few years now. I received a message one day from a familiar-looking name on the business's Facebook page from a woman asking to come try us out. We set it up, she comes in for an introduction. She's a very, very large and out-of-shape woman at this point. After about 5 minutes of working with her, it hits me that this lady used to be about half her current size and was an absolute bee back in her heyday. I decided not to bring it up to her as she appeared to be struggling in life and came to us in a time of need, and I took it, as I do with all of my clients, as a cry for help. Not to mention, I'm a grown man now, and that seemed pretty silly and insignificant in life today. Months later during one of the classes, I noticed her struggling real hard, so I go over to offer some encouragement. As I lean down to say something to her, I notice she's crying faintly to herself. She looks up at me and quietly says, "Sorry for how nasty I was to you years ago, and thank you for doing this for me." Turns out an old mutual friend told her about my place and she recognized me as the owner and came to me on purpose. No, not a story of revenge or retribution, but she reached out to someone she was terrible to, and today, she's repurposed, and I find it to be quite inspiring. Not quite the same, but about 10 years ago, I caught my dad screaming at the TV. This freaking jerk got his own show. He was such a piece of crap when we were kids. He would beat you up for your lunch money, push you for no good reason, take your toys, and based on the way he acts now, it doesn't seem like he grew up much. He was talking about Paul Toodles Sr. from American Choppers. We met at a bar where a large number of our high school class happened to be. He described me as his arch enemy. I realized I hadn't even thought about him in 10 years. She got the whole middle school through junior high to call me gay. I was not gay. She is. She came out of the closet right after high school. I was a jerk in high school. Then I went through the karma-mandated fat phase. Made a guy's day when he saw me at work. I went from pretty dang fine in high school to man the harpoons. I'm also nicer. He came in and said, "Wow, the fanciful unicorn?" And I said, "Yep, does this make it feel better?" and spread out my arms. He responded, "Heck yeah, you were a jerk." I said sorry. I was pretty immature. And then we talked like normal adults. Moved to a new school in 7th grade and was doing fine. Making friends, good grades. Then somehow ran afoul of this bigger kid. He'd been held back a few times. Typical bully, pushed little kids into lockers, loved to torment girls, and ran with a pack of acolytes who adored and aped him. In Texas at the time, if a kid didn't like you, he, quote, called you out, challenged you to a fight after school. Well, Zed calls me out one day because I was a, quote, queer from New York. Clueless me, moved there from said New York where people are civilized, I said, sure, okay. A few days later, in front of his acolytes and a small group of my friends, he proceeds to beat the crap out of me. It was 7th grade, so the damage wasn't excessive, mostly to my pride. Spent the rest of middle school known as one of the guys Zed beat the crap out of. Fast forward about 7 years. Home from college and going to the grocery store for mom. Who should I see bagging my goodies but Zed? Taking a look at him, I see a horrible scar running from the top of his head down around the back of his skull and neck and under his shirt. His face lights up when he sees me, and he says in slightly slurred speech, "Hey, didn't we go to school together? We're friends from school, right?" He walks with me out to the parking lot, and as we walk, I learn that he had been hit by a car in high school while biking home one day. Accident required a half dozen surgeries, and it left Zed mentally impaired and a completely different person. He put my stuff in the car, shook my hand for a good 30 seconds, and kept asking me to, quote, come back and see me sometime. I had hated few people in my life to that point, and no one more than him. Almost cried driving home. I felt so bad for him and disgusted with myself for my previous hatred. I ran into somebody in high school that I used to pick on regularly when we were in 1st or 2nd grade. We recognized each other, and I walked up to him. We exchanged a few words, since I hadn't seen him in close to 10 years, and then didn't talk again. But right before we parted ways, I apologized for the way I treated him as a child. I couldn't stress how sorry I was for being a piece of crap to him for no other reason than I felt like it. I still occasionally think about him and where he's at in life. I work in a jail. I've seen the, quote, popular kids on the other side of the bars. I ran into my high school bully at a gay bar a few years back. He was my bottom that night. One of mine was this kid named Patrick. One incident led to 2 of my ribs being broken when he jumped on my chest with his knees. Another resulted in a broken eye socket after being kicked in the face by him and 2 of his friends. Eventually, I moved in with my father and didn't see any of my old bullies again, except for a few. Some have been relatively nice, and some are jerks. During high school, I took some martial arts classes, Taekwondo. I was always a larger kid, but too timid to fight back, but martial arts helped me to overcome that. Fast forward to a year or 2 after high school, and I go over to visit my mother. She had moved in with a real jerk who was into God knows what. And guess who's there? Patrick. He's now almost a foot shorter than me, skinny as a middle school girl, and was undoubtedly on meth. I later found out he also did heroin and a myriad of other drugs. We end up talking, and I tell him about how I have sinus trouble because of the beating I got from him and his friends. He laughed. I looked around at my younger brother, who had got very skinny from not eating, and sister, the environment they were in, and right then I made a decision. I turned to my mother and said, I don't give a crap if this is the kind of people you want to be around, indicating the piece of crap next to me, but we are leaving. So I piled my siblings in my car and brought them home with me. They shortly moved in with my father officially and have been much better off since. Patrick made a comment about me, quote, disrespecting him and my mother, and I told him he had no respect for himself, obviously, so who is he to talk like that? He went to hit me and I just stared at him. He dropped his fist quick after I stared him down for what felt like an hour. TLDR, met middle school bully, he's a meth head, was living with my mother, took my siblings and left after verbally sparring with him. Feels good, man. Edit. Wow, this got a lot more karma than I thought. Didn't have time to write this up earlier, but to clear a few things up, he didn't bang my mother. I don't think. He was basically just there all the time like drug addicts are wont to do. My mother was living, and screwing, her boyfriend at the time, whose house it actually was. And the thought of snapping him like a twig did occur to me, but that paled in comparison to what he was doing to himself. If he didn't clean his ways up by now, he's likely dead or in prison. Beating the crap out of him wouldn't have made me feel any better. Plus, it's a lot easier on the knuckles. When I was a kid, I was fat. I used to get picked on all the time by this kid at church named Rusty. He was about 5 years older than me, and every couple of weeks, he would beat me up. I moved away when I was about 14, and thankfully, I didn't have to deal with him anymore. When I went to college, I decided to get my act together and get healthy. To that end, I started taking mixed martial arts. I did it for about 2 years and lost about 40 pounds. When I graduated, I moved back to where I was from and started looking for a new MMA gym. I went to the most reputable one, and who should be there but Rusty? It sounds too good to be true, but I swear to God it happened. He hadn't changed a bit. The first thing he said to me was, "Finally trying to learn to defend yourself, huh?" I had called ahead, and the instructor knew my deal and had arranged for me to come watch. I left my gear in the car. At the end of class, they do free rolling, jiu-jitsu sparring. Rusty comes up to me, having no knowledge that I am the least bit experienced, and starts begging the instructor to let him spar me, so he can, quote, show me the ropes. After all, he's been in MMA for 3 months now, and he never misses a UFC pay-per-view. I went outside and changed. Long story short, we sparred and I choked him out 3 times. Afterwards, I signed up for classes, he grabbed his bag, left, and never came back. This is my favorite story out of everything that has happened in my life thus far. I'm the only person I know that got to beat up my childhood bully as an adult. I was in need for an accountant job, so I searched several websites of businesses. I came across a very worthy company, so I wanted to apply. While I was filling out the form, I looked around the website some more and saw the name of the head chief of the company. I was depressed for the rest of the day. My high school bully, who bullied me every day, is now the head chief of his own freaking business. I'm an accountant. It doesn't always work out. This one is a classic. This girl used to torment me all through high school and middle school. Really went out of her way to tear me down. Whenever we had a class together, she would make her extreme dislike for me apparent. And, of course, other kids followed. I couldn't open my mouth without some kind of ridicule. Of course I was miserable, and my dad would try to cheer me up. Don't worry, kiddo. One day, she'll be working at a McDonald's and serving you fries. He actually referred to her as McDonald's for years. A couple years after graduating high school, I went to a Hardee's with my dad. And there was McDonald's behind the counter. I go out to place my order, and before I finish, she says, "You don't remember me, do you?" "Oh, I remember you." "Oh, so, would you like fries with that?" "Why, yes. Yes, I would." Way to go, Dad. Called it 9 years in advance. I had an evil 5th grade teacher who made my life terrible for a year. She even instigated a, quote, pick on Stoops day. I saw her at the bar where my friend worked. The day before this, we had invented a shot that tastes like urinal cake smell, Captain Morgan's Lime Bite mixed with Miller High Life. I bought my old teacher and her friends around from across the bar. I made eye contact and raised my shot of Wild Turkey. They gave me a curious look, but took the urinal cake shots nonetheless. My old teacher proceeded to throw up on the bar and get 86th from one of the only bars in town. Screw you, Mrs. Freeman! My sister has since become really good friends with her childhood tormentors. The sad part to me is that the reason she was able to patch things up was that she was a very late bloomer and ended up the kind of popular person they wanted to be friends with. I guess she kind of sold out and became friends with them. How on earth the topic never comes up amongst them, I do not know. Maybe it's her long-term plan to enact revenge, gain trust, destroy them, preferably by dumping pig's blood on their heads at a formal event of some kind. My dad is a very large man. We're talking 6'7", 300 pounds big. He would always tell me this story to cheer me up when girls would be jerks to me. He was pretty chubby in high school, so he played football and was good at it, but just really loved playing basketball. So his freshman year, he tried out for the team and didn't make it. The coach, who was a history teacher at the school, stated his weight as an issue. Fair enough. He worked hard to lose some weight over the summer, blah blah blah. Enter sophomore year. Ends up having the coach as his history teacher. Great, he thinks. He could be a good student and hopefully get on the team. Wrong. This adult man decided to call my father names related to his weight and harass him in front of the class. Not cool, but my dad was too proud and never said anything. Ended up making varsity his sophomore year because of a coaching change. Fast forward about 5 years. My dad was working as a bouncer at a bar in a nearby town to where he went to school. It was a regular night when who walks in? Jerk history teacher. Perfect. He thinks, I'll let it go, be professional, until he recognizes my dad as, quote, the chubby kid who was a coward. My dad looks at him and says, Sir, I think you've had too much to drink. It's time for you to go home. The coach is saying, No, I'm fine, etc., etc. My dad grabs him by the shirt and says, No, it's time for you to step outside. You've had too much to drink. The coach decides to swing at my dad, and that's when he loses it. He states, This is for all the kids you called fat, you piece of crap, and proceeds to beat the tar out of him. A long story, I know, but my favorite by far. My dad and his old bouncer friends always tell it when they got together, too. Ah, revenge. Content warning, this one's pretty violent. My dad did something similar. He grew up as a poorish farm boy in Ireland. All he ever wanted to do was sing in the church Christmas Day show. He bought himself a guitar and taught himself to play, but his headmaster at school wouldn't let him, or any of the family for that matter, perform in it. Fast forward about 30 years, we are back in Ireland for my grandfather's funeral, and we walk into my cousin's pub, and sitting at the bar is this old man. I had never seen my dad so angry before in my life. His face was purple with anger at the sight of this guy. He decked this old man so hard he knocked him off his bar stool and onto his back. My dad crouched down inches from his face and said, "Get out before I punch you for every boy you laid eyes on." This old man looked like he was going to crap himself and ran out of there as fast as he could. I was mortified and felt awful for this old man until my dad told me what this man was doing. He was touching the boys from school. He would take his picks and basically cycle through them as he saw fit. The boys not being touched didn't get away easy either. They were hit with the shillelagh until they bled. My dad hated this man and says that had he found him when he was a drinking man, he may have killed him. TLDR, my dad decked an old man for kitty-diddling his friends. This is kind of morbid. In the 6th grade, I was friends with this kid. I remember one day telling him about an episode of Rescue 911 that I saw, where a guy was driving an ATV in a field and didn't see that there was a barbed wire. Fast forward a year, and this kid started to make really mean comments about me. He would make fun of my appearance and how my family had no money in front of everyone. I'm from an immigrant family, and he would always tell me to go back to my country. Middle school was really tough on me because of kids like him, but held back from fighting him because I knew nothing good would come from it. Fast forward to the summer after high school graduation, that kid was driving an ATV in a field, didn't see the barbed wire, and was decapitated. Weird that 7 years prior, I had described to my future tormentor exactly how he will die. I've got 2. I was picked on a lot. About 10 years ago, I got a temporary job at Kroger. It was just stocking shelves, and I had another restaurant job lined up, but needed something for about 2 months while I went through a lengthy hiring process there. Spoiler, I wound up getting an even better job elsewhere and wound up never taking that. So, I go to get my check on my first payday at Kroger and find out the manager at the front is one of the guys who used to bully the crap out of me in high school. He made small talk for a minute. "Hey, how you been? Good to see you." He clearly remembered. Once everyone walked away, he leaned in and said, "Hey, deprecated zero, I'm really sorry for all the crap I did to you in school. I was a stupid jerk kid." I smiled, held out my hand, thanked him, and told him it's all in the past. That was really cool. The other is less cool but hilarious to me. This girl was, quote, the prom queen, basically. The stereotypical mean girl dating the football player. My opinion of her was always that she was just spoiled, worthless, and dumb. I don't usually take joy in other people's misfortune, but I felt schadenfreude in unparalleled amounts the day I walked into Buffalo Wild Wings and saw her standing behind the counter. This is maybe 10 years out of high school. She looks exactly the same. Put on some weight maybe, but hair still done the same. She still looks like she got Effie Trinket to do her makeup, so on. You could tell at a glance that she's never mentally moved past 8th grade. I asked how she'd been, tried to politely talk to her because, hey, I want people to do well. She was a jerk. Was like, "Ew, you're deprecated zero." I just raised my eyebrows at her and let it go. Long story short, her boss was my roommate. I asked him about her. Single mother, just got kicked out of her mom's house. He just hired her like 2 weeks earlier. He confronted her about talking down to customers and wound up firing her. Felt like justice. I lucked out and didn't really garner any enemies while in middle school and high school. Mostly because I was the poor kid at a snobby private school in Nashville, Tennessee, until I moved in 9th grade and nobody would talk to me. There was this one really obnoxious boy in one of my classes in 7th grade though. Treated everyone like handmaids, but the parents had money, so nothing was ever really done about it. Ran across his Facebook page the other day. His parents just bought him his second Lamborghini because he wrecked the first one. I try not to hold animosity towards anyone, but I hope somebody keys his car. I was working in a video rental store in Houston, circa 1989, about 2 years after I graduated high school. In comes a girl that had always been awful to me from 10th grade to graduation. She would cross a room just to say something mean, and I had no history with this girl at all. I had never actually said a word to her. All our exchanges were just her saying something mean to me. I didn't even know her last name. I must have reminded her of someone. She comes into the store and sheepishly said that she wanted 3 dirty movies. She didn't seem to remember me. She said her best friend was getting married and she wanted some dirty movies for the bachelorette party. The shop had a small adult room that you had to access by coming behind the counter, but she didn't want to go in there. She asked me to select 3 films. She was squirming with embarrassment as I tried to find out what she was, quote, into, and kind of acted like I thought the films were for her and her alone. She said, just grab 3 good ones, I don't care. So I selected 3, all lesbian adult films, and she slunk out with them. I would have loved to see the look on their faces when they popped those tapes in. She returned them through the night drop so she wouldn't have to look anyone in the eye when she brought them back. She rented on her parents' account. I sent a notice through the mail to her parents that, quote, Mona's 3-way slit party had been returned damaged and they owed us $30. Met a kid that was an absolute brute in high school. Thought he was tough stuff. I think I only went face to face with him once over some dumb crap about him threatening a friend of mine. No real fight ever came from it, but he was definitely an enemy. Met him randomly in an airport halfway across the country maybe 4 years after high school. He was the nicest guy. The Marines beat the stupid right out of him. I was playing poker in Atlantic City about 7 years ago, and one of the guys that bullied me, Chad, sat at my table. There's no way he recognized me. I was actually playing on a no-limit hold'em table while waiting for a seat to open in a 2-way high-low game. Anyway, I stayed at the NLHE table just to take his money. I played probably 95% of the pots he was in. He was pretty drunk and wasn't very good. I got close to $600 off of him in a little over an hour before he decided to quit. I have no idea what he does for a living, but I am 100% sure he is a big loser when he plays cards. Military personnel of Reddit. What's the best, weirdest, or funniest punishment you've seen handed down by a superior? USMC boot. One kid on Firewatch failed to notice the DI coming on deck, which means you immediately salute and report your post. So the DI ran up to the rifle rack, smacked it, and yelled, "Bam! You're dead." He tried to respond, but was cut off by the DI. "You're a ghost now. You can't talk. Go act like a ghost." Then the kid had to wander around the squad bay for the rest of his 2-hour Firewatch acting like a ghost, and he took that responsibility with stride. Plenty of ridiculous, "Ooh, I'm a ghost" noises and screwing with people's racks. We were all laughing our butts off for the next hour till our senior got mad. Here's another one that happened to me. An SDI from the squad bay above us told us that whenever he comes on deck and we call the greeting, we all have to squat until he tells us to get up. So we do. Now, one day, I'm out doing gear guard with a buddy. Apparently, the SDI came on deck and told everyone to stop squatting. Coming back from gear guard, I didn't know that. He comes on deck, I squat, and no one else is. I look around. I crack a smile, and that was the oh crap moment. Though, instead of just getting smoked, he told me he wanted me to sing. Side straddle hops and mountain climbers, Marine Corps push-ups, double timers. While doing the exercises I was singing. The tune, the wheels on the bus go round and round. So it goes into the duty hut and I start. At first I was quiet and wasn't into it, but I decided, screw it, let's go for it. So for the next 20 minutes, approximately, I was belching out wheels on the bus go round and round with those lyrics as loud as I could sing it while doing those exercises. The rest of my platoon was cleaning rifles. Everyone freaking lost it after a few minutes, even the DIs. All 3 of them covered their faces and just stood there laughing. It was amazing, and a really, really good workout. I was exhausted. Marine Boot Camp. We had a guy that somehow got his watch through the in-dock. They take all your crap when you first get there. Well, the DIs found out he had it when they saw him wearing it one day, so they put him in the squad bay trash can and put the lid on it. Every time they walked by and kicked it, he'd pop out with his watch and yell, "Sir, the time on deck is 09:45!" And then go back into his can like the freaking Grouch from Sesame Street. It was really, really hard not to laugh at that. During my first deployment to Iraq as a 50 cal gunner, I had a salty sergeant for a team leader. Dude had been at the tip of the spear for the Iraq invasion, been to Baghdad in 2005, and now he was back for his 3rd time in 2007. Not only was he intimidating, but he knew how to discipline your butt if you stepped out of line. I was a stupid, young, private first class with about a year in the Army. I knew what was right and what was wrong, and thankfully, was able to get on his good side. Our driver though? Nuh-uh. He was a short, stupid specialist with a crustache who recently did 4 years in Korea. This dude was so off, he even re-enlisted for it when his first stint was over. Dude was just freaking weird and gross. Always had an excuse for everything, nothing was ever his fault. He loved trying to pass the blame down my way, mostly because he outranked me. Our sergeant normally knew what was up and corrected him accordingly. Well, during a convoy security mission one day in southern Iraq, he hit a pothole. Like, a big one. Probably 20 foot long by 20 foot wide. Our sergeant flips out, asking what the heck he was doing. The driver tries blaming it on me, saying I never let him know it was there. Since I was the gunner, I had to make everything aware to him because I was the eyes and ears. The sergeant chews him out, saying it was the driver's fault he didn't avoid the pothole since I was up top scanning for threats. We were the lead vehicle, so it's not like this pothole was obscured by anything, especially since it was in broad daylight. The driver then starts saying, "I don't know, Sergeant. I couldn't see it because I'm short." He wasn't that short. Guy was maybe 5'7", give or take an inch. He wasn't paying attention, and that's what the sergeant wanted to hear, because it was the truth. Well, this irritates the heck out of our sergeant, and he calls for the entire convoy, something like 20 semis, 6 Humvees, and 2 M111-7 ASVs, to halt. He then tells me to pass down an empty 50 caliber can. I do so with a quickness. The sergeant then passes the can to the driver and makes him use it as a booster seat. The driver protests, then my sergeant gives him a direct order to do so. The driver backs down and does it. At every gate to every base we approached, my sergeant made the driver open the door and show every guard what he was sitting on. Then he was forced to sing, "I'm a little teapot, me, oh my, I sit on a high chair so we don't blow up and die." Most of the guards just laughed their butts off. A few radioed for other guards to come see it. He was the laughingstock of our battalion for months. A recruit in USMC boot camp thought he was special because he was an Eagle Scout. The drill instructor picked up on this, and during PT, took him into the woods and made him build a nest. Then, he had to squat over it in order to keep his eggs warm. When we were heading to Iraq, we had to pass through Kuwait. Kuwait, being the transient hub for soldiers heading to and leaving Iraq, it is very chaotic. As a result of jet lag and the chaotic nature of Kuwait, my buddy had brought his weapon to the shower, but forgot to grab it on his way back to the tent. Shortly after he left, a sergeant came bursting through the door to see him sitting on his cot, messing around with his new video camera he had just purchased to bring on the deployment. His punishment was to get up, take his weapon and camera, and go sit in the community shower area and make sure no one else leaves their weapon in the shower for the night. So, what would you see when you went to take off your clothes to get in the shower was a fully dressed guy with a video camera just sitting there looking at you. There was a time when we made a private sweep all the sunshine off the sidewalks. It took the poor guy all day. One of the first days in basic, a guy in my platoon was standing at attention while having his room inspected by the instructor. It didn't matter how nice his room was because there was a large piece of fuzz/fluff on his shirt that immediately drew the sergeant's attention. Imagine a female French-Canadian sergeant with this accent. "Recruit Bloggins, what is that on your shirt? Is it a fluffy?" "Yes, Sergeant. Why is there a fluffy on your shirt, Bloggins?" "I must have missed it, Sergeant." "Missed it? It is so huge. How did you miss such a big fluffy?" She picks it off of him. "Hold out your hand." He holds out his hand and she places it in his palm. "This is Mr. Fluffy. Find a home for him, like a pill bottle or something. From now on, whenever I want to see Mr. Fluffy, you must bring him to me." And so, for the rest of basic, every time the sergeant found a piece of fuzz, she would yell out, "Mr. Fluffy!" And Bloggins would have to march over to her and present Mr. Fluffy, and she would formally hand him the new piece of fuzz to add to Mr. Fluffy. There was heck to pay if he didn't have Mr. Fluffy with him at all times. Week 1 in Army basic training, we had a soldier ask for an omelet in chow line, which was not allowed because there was absolutely no time to make custom omelets for every single basic training soldier. The cook started making the omelet when a drill sergeant asked what the heck was going on. The basic training soldier replied, "Go around, drill sergeant, I'm waiting on an omelet." Needless to say, this was the wrong thing to say and do week 1 in basic training. Our platoon motto was henceforth, "Go around, drill sergeant, I'm waiting on an omelet." And the basic training soldier was henceforth named Private Omelet. In the Marine Corps, when we really screwed up, we would go, quote, fishing. It is where you squat down like you're sitting in a chair and hold a shovel out in front of you in the air like a fishing pole. Then, you just sit there for a long time, and if the shovel would start to droop down, my sergeant would grab the tip of the shovel and start to shake it and make me pretend I was reeling in the big one. One time, me and a buddy got in trouble together, so they made him fish and me flop around on the deck like a fish he had already caught for almost an hour. Now jump on the deck and flop like a fish! SpongeBob SquarePants! We were deployed in Iraq, and a guy was peeing in water bottles instead of walking to the bathroom at night. This is a common thing, but this guy wasn't getting rid of the bottles. He'd keep them underneath his cot for some reason. When the first sergeant found this out, he made the guy report to the commander while holding all of his pee bottles in a box in front of him. They tore into this guy while he was holding a box of his own urine. Guy in basic dropped the biggest turd you've ever seen in the commode. So he shows the drill sergeants, who then make him suit up in full combat gear, weapon and all, and guard it all night. The whole, "Halt! Who goes there?" Pretty amusing. Navy basic training. All of us are doing push-ups. When the instructor says down, everyone counts. When the instructor says up, one guy in particular, the screw-up, is told to shout, "Would you like fries with that?" The instructor told him to get used to it because that's what he's going to be saying for the rest of his life. Down. 1. Up. Would you like fries with that? Down. 2. Up. Would you like fries with that? There was a pool of tears from laughter on the floor below me. I wrote a bad check while stationed in Korea. $2.06 over the limit. My punishment? To cut the parade field grass with scissors by morning. Had to cut the PT field with scissors along with 3 other guys because while we were buffing the floors, one of them somehow managed to get a candy bar and it fell out of his pocket in front of a drill. Everyone just froze and stared at the Snickers. It's like seeing a bus come at you in slow motion. You can't move, you can't speak, you just watch. Edit: candy is strictly forbidden, along with sodas, snack foods, laptops, phones, etc. Your only belongings are what you are issued minus stationery and, depending on the drills you have, photos. For 3 or 4 months, you only eat what they feed you and you only do what they tell you. The food though? Good lord, the food. Breakfast was freaking awesome, and dinner was usually extremely filling. You didn't go hungry at all. Since you signed on that dotted line, you signed away all privileges for 3 months. I was in a gender-mixed company in basic. The 3rd floor of the barracks was split with females on one half and males on the other. Males were not allowed in the female half and vice versa. My platoon was out back practicing throwing grenade bodies, and a window on the female side of the 3rd floor opened, and a male sneaked out of the window onto the ledge. It was immediately obvious to everyone, including our drill sergeant, that he had been in there messing around with the female, and a drill sergeant must have come down the hall, forcing him to get out onto the ledge so he wouldn't get caught. Our drill sergeant looked at the guy for a minute and then yelled, really sarcastically, "Don't do it, Private, you have lots to live for." Then they put him on self-unalive watch and made him hand over his belts and tie and shoelaces and everything that he could hang himself with and made him drag his newly bare mattress out into the hallway next to the fire guard desk and sleep out there every night until we graduated 4 weeks later. And they made his battle buddy sleep on the floor next to him for the first week. TLDR, male caught messing around with female, treated like potential self-unalive for remaining month of BCT. Officers can't punish soldiers with any punishment that doesn't follow guidelines. That said, they could be ordered some stupid things. My friend got ordered to move a box weighing about 50 pounds from the barracks to the shower every 2 minutes for 2 hours. The officer's reason for it was because he didn't know where to put it and was trying to decide if it should be at the barracks or the shower. In the end, he ended up telling him to load it up in the truck. Having to apply suntan lotion to a crap ton of large rocks so they, quote, don't get sunburned, then having to flip every rock and reapply as needed. I once spent 12 hours cleaning screens on windows. That doesn't sound bad, does it? Try this. Find a small wire about the same gauge as the holes in your window screen. Gently push the wire through the hole in the screen to make sure that the hole is empty. Repeat for 3 minutes, then look away from the screen. Anything weird with your eyes? Try it for hours. Had a guy in a warehouse drop a pallet load of assorted nuts and bolts off a forklift. Boxes broke open, 100,000 little nuts and bolts everywhere of various sizes. He had to sweep them into a pile, repair the boxes, fit each nut to a screw to make sure of the size. The pile was then inspected, then he had to remove each nut from the screw and place the screw in the proper box, then place the nut in the proper box. Probably 25 or 50 per box, I don't remember. Doesn't sound too bad, right? Took 3 12-hour days. He wasn't allowed to sit down. He had to bend over at the waist, pick up a tiny nut and screw, straighten up, screw them together, then bend over for another. More than 100,000 times. Think about it. During an inspection and basic training, a piece of lint was found in our dryer. I ordered to, quote, handcuff the intruder and construct a detention facility where the intruder could be interrogated. I was to have an in-depth report on who he was, where he was from, and what he was doing in the building. My grandfather, who was a Korea veteran, had a story about a guy who kept getting things taken away from him as punishment. Apparently, before it was over, he had no socks or shoelaces, no underwear, and they took the inside part of his helmet. My brother told me that when he was in basic, a drill sergeant yelled at this guy to, quote, beat his face, meaning to do push-ups. Said guy had no clue it meant that, and promptly punched himself in the face really, really hard and fell to the ground. The drill sergeant had to walk that one off, and my brother said you could hear him laughing hysterically as he walked behind a building. Not totally relevant, but I figured I'd share. Drill was smoking us one morning, and one of the other boots kept making karate sounds on the up on the push-ups. Drill was down with us, so he'd shout, down, hold it, to the left, and up, and you'd hear, hi-ya, in a long, low, guttural grunt. Eventually, everyone is laughing, including the drill, at the up sounds. Finally, he collapses in a fit of giggles and shouts, I hate all you suckers. Then he walks over to the other drill, who is snickering, and says, I quit. I can't smoke these suckers if they make me laugh. Didn't see him until after chow. Another from basic was, a private was caught walking to the showers without wearing his clothes, just holding his towel and walking nude. The showers were in the same bay, and it was just males in the bay, but a female drill from another platoon came in and saw him and made him drop and give 50 push-ups while nude. A buddy of mine had a DI that would make anyone who did anything stupid chug a smart water, quote, in case it helps. A guy I worked with had a habit of falling asleep at his desk. He was a real scumbag. Unfortunately, he was also a 1-star general's son. They made him sit at his desk with one of those exercise yoga ball things. The sucker still fell asleep, but he would hit his head on the desk or fall over. He also decided to tell his supervisor he had an appointment, but instead took a nap in his room. They called the cops on him and had him arrested for dereliction of duty. Fun stuff. Got caught in basic with my iPod, and I ran around the camp for near 2 hours with my iPod over my head, shouting, I'm a stupid jerk for bringing my iPod in the field, as the, quote, enemy was attacking our camp. I then proceeded to put my iPod in a plastic bag, then taped it onto my helmet, and from there on, I responded to Private iPod. When my instructor shouted play, I had to sing, skip, I had to switch songs, etc. It lasted 2 weeks, even during the night when I had 1 to 2 hours to sleep. Throwaway to protect the innocent. I was once in the Navy, stationed at Kings Bay, a Navy submarine and training base in rural southern Georgia, USA. A stone's throw away from Florida. Due to this base may or may not contain nuclear weapons, there is a Marine Security Detachment/Battalion/something stationed there as well. The majority of these poor sods were just out of Marine kill camp and were hot and heavy to go off to Middle Eastistan and, quote, shoot them some towel heads. Unfortunately, they'd landed themselves in a swamp in rural southern Georgia. Needless to say, they typically made very poor choices. Their superiors, however, normally disciplined them well. Amongst the punishments I witnessed were the following. Number 1. A group of Marines had decided to play soccer with an armadillo, killing it. They were forced to perform a full military funeral for the poor creature, then stand honor guard at its grave for a week, 24/7, in full dress uniform. In the middle of the summer. Remember, this is in a swamp in southern Georgia. Number 2. I happened to be out early one Sunday morning, chain smoking and drinking coffee outside of the Navy barracks, when an interesting sight came by. There were 13 Marines. 12 of them were running and carrying a telephone pole on their shoulders, 6 in front, 6 in back. The 13th man was in the middle of the pole, hanging from it, doing pull-ups, as the telephone pole was being carried by the other 12 running Marines. After a certain number of pull-ups, he would swap with one of the carriers. Number 3. Speaking of, this base may or may not contain nuclear weapons. The Marines had to do regular patrols, driving slowly around in Humvees or armored cars around the storage bunkers and the base at large. Apparently, there was a problem with the Marines in the vehicles falling asleep and running off the road. A brilliant NCO had the following great idea. Only one Marine would be in the vehicle, whilst the other Marine would be running behind it. If the vehicle were to start swaying off the road, the runner would awaken his driver comrade and they'd swap. It didn't take long, however, for this plan to fail. Patrol vehicle went off the road, crashed, and the Marine running stayed the course, smacking into the back of the vehicle and rendering himself unconscious. Some idiot gun bunny didn't check pressures before they took their piece out onto the field. Instead of being smart and zipping his lip, he said something stupid to the master gunny about the cooler temperatures causing the pressure to drop. For 13 hours the next day, he had to deflate every tire on every artillery piece, refill them to spec with a hand pump, and if anyone asked him what the heck he was doing, he had to yell, "I am replacing the summer air in the tires with fresh winter air!" Reddit, what's the most messed up food your parents would make regularly when you were a kid? Get ready for a lot of cursed things in this post. My mom would mix cooked mac and cheese with applesauce in a bowl and give it to us. My mom was from the, quote, boil the ever-loving crap out of everything school of cooking. Carrots boiled to sad orangish lumps, broccoli steamed beyond any recognition. Corn may have started fresh, but by the time she was done with it, it resembled creamed corn but lacking any possible flavor or texture. Barbecue chicken? Boil that son of a gun completely before you blacken it on the grill, lest you and everyone you love die horrifically from salmonella. The things she would do to a steak are crimes against humanity. Combine all this with an 80s desire to avoid salt at all costs, and my dad's pathological fear of bad breath resulting in a blanket household ban on onions and garlic, and mealtime was a grayish, disappointing place. I now take cooking very seriously. When they were younger, my grandma and her siblings were forced to eat cream of mushroom soup sandwiches. Her dad would slice the soup like cranberry sauce and spread it across the bread. The thing is, listener, this is an example of two great things that don't go together. Cream of mushroom soup? My mom uses it to make tater tot casserole. It's very good. Adds a lot of richness, savoriness, and creaminess. Sandwiches? Can't go wrong with them. They're one of my favorite things to make. But a cream of mushroom soup sandwich? Are y'all out here drinking your sandwiches? My mom liked to make spaghetti. That's not weird, I hear you say. Let me mention that she made it with raisins. I already don't like this post, but we're gonna keep going. Like, get a pot of water boiling, throw in the noodles, and some raisins at the same time. No spaghetti sauce afterward, just cooked spaghetti and rehydrated raisins on a plate. She was very proud of this dish, and she didn't understand why we hated Mom's day to cook. Edit. Guys, I know a raisin is a dehydrated grape, but rehydrating it doesn't just turn it back into a grape. It turns it into some disgusting raisin juice bomb, which is even worse when warm. I'm really trying hard to understand the thought process that leads to a person deciding to cook spaghetti with raisins, but I'm drawing a blank. So, bear with me on this, but I have an explanation. Not a justification, but an explanation. On the island of Sicily, one of the regions of Italy, some meat dishes actually include raisins or golden raisins. For example, braciole. That's Braciole. It's a meat dish that's a roulade, which is a rolled and stuffed meat that contains stuff like cheese, herbs, and breadcrumbs. I've never had raisins with meat before, but if Italy is doing it, home of the best pizza and pasta in all of the world, I have no reason to judge them. Quote, asparagus salad, which consisted of 5 to 6 limp, cold pieces of canned asparagus served on a bed of iceberg lettuce with a glob of mayo on top. Yeah, there's no bearing with me on this one. This is just white people food. We were beyond poor, so many of my mother's creations were simply a matter of making do with what we had. That didn't make them any more palatable, though. The two most memorable: canned peas cooked in powdered milk and served over toast. She called it, quote, pea wiggle. We had it at least once a month. Canned spaghetti sauce and a slice of surplus cheese placed on a slice of bread and toasted in the oven. This was, quote, poor man's pizza. I actually loved this as a kid. Tried it again a few years ago and was less impressed. Not everything can be credited to a lack of money. She used to slice up kielbasa and steam it. The result was very much like styrofoam chips. This is a great time to mention the YouTube channel The Wolf Pit, the WOLFE Pit, all one word. It focuses on cooking on a really tight budget, so I highly recommend it if you're looking to eat cheap without having asparagus salad. My dad got into a phase of watching Emeril Lagasse, and it inspired him to try and be fancy. I'll never forget. He made these hamburger patties and put chunks of bread mixed in with the raw meat, but the bread just absorbed all the blood. They looked like huge, mushy, bloody warts hanging off the meat. It was absolutely repulsive looking. Okay, after reading that nightmare sentence, let me tell you why you should put bread in your meatballs. If you take some day-old bread, tear it up into chunks, and soak them in milk or preferably heavy cream, maybe throw in some seasonings into it, that's called a panade. When mixed into your meatballs, it actually helps retain moisture and prevents dry, sad meatballs. But don't just stick plain white bread into your burgers, that's just not going to work out well for anybody. My mom used to make a Vietnamese noodle dish called bun dieu, but didn't always have time to make it from scratch, so she often used a canned broth. I am allergic to peanuts, and every time she made this dish, I would complain to her that I didn't want to eat anymore because my lips were swelling up and I was itchy. She is having none of that sass, obviously, and makes me eat the whole bowl. A few years down the line, she decides to read the ingredients label on the back and just says, you should probably stop eating that. As was the custom in the 1950s to the 1980s, when my parents were coming of age, my parents only ate vegetables boiled and unseasoned. So, boiled carrots, boiled Brussels sprouts, etc. No salt, no pepper, no olive oil or butter. This led me to believe that vegetables are supposed to taste bad. Later in life, I discovered seared, roasted, caramelized, and seasoned vegetables, and those things are the bomb. Every day, I'm caramelizing or roasting a veggie. Mom would make frozen whitefish, baked in an oven until it was overcooked and just dehydrated, shrunken fillets of white fish. Then, she'd serve it with boiled cauliflower and white rice. White entree, white starch, white vegetable, all served on a white plate. What did we drink? Yeah, milk. White milk. My mom made, and still makes, a dish called cat heads. It's basically chicken with cream of celery, some vegetables, and a bit of stew inside 2 rolled-up crescent rolls. It looks exactly like a shaved, cooked cat's head, so she called it that and we have it every Christmas. This comment actually says, so basically mini chicken pot pies but shaped like cat heads? I would eat that, and I gotta say, I agree with that. I freaking demolish chicken pot pie every time I have it. They would wrap bologna around a banana, and that was my snack. I don't know where the idea came from. I freaking hated it. I just don't know, guys. I grew up to become allergic to bananas. My grandma made leftovers casserole while my mom was growing up. You take a bunch of cooked noodles, whatever leftovers seem appropriate, add a can of cream of something soup, throw a topping on it, and bake it till it's food. My mother hated it. She called it one-pot glop. Grandma made it at least once every time we visited, and I loved it. Once when I saw her cooking it, I cheered, "Yay, one-pot glop!" The look of betrayal on Grandma's face was very confusing. I made one-pot glop for breakfast this morning. Overcooked steak. Like leather tier overcooked. Grew up on a dairy farm, so beef was plentiful. But if we didn't choke down the shoe leather dinner, my mother would have a violent meltdown about how we were all ungrateful little jerks. My mom, God bless her, was not a very talented cook. She tried, but she just wasn't interested and didn't have the knack. At least I got a home-cooked meal most nights, so I can't complain. Mom used to buy these awful Polish sausages. She would take a few and throw them in a pot of water with a head of cabbage. Let everything boil for a while, and that was dinner. Mom called it, quote, bratwurst. I lived in fear of quote-unquote bratwurst my whole life until I was in college. There was a German festival and all of my friends were like, oh boy, let's go get some brats. I thought they were crazy. Then someone handed me a real brat on a bun with spicy mustard and sauerkraut, and I realized that I had been all wrong about the true nature of bratwurst. That was probably the best thing I learned in college. A dry ketchup sandwich. It was old stale bread that was broken in half for the 2 pieces of bread for a sandwich with ketchup in between them. No meat, no cheese, just ketchup. If we were lucky, the bread wasn't too stale and the taste kinda resembled French fries. This one just makes me sad. Like, not even in a pity way or oh, I can't believe that she would do that, she's so disgusting. This just sounds like a depression meal or a meal you would make if you were like in the negatives in your bank account. My mom loved making pork chops, but she cooked the heck out of them, so it was like eating rubber. We ended up calling the dinner Shake and Incinerate. My grandfather used to buy tubs of fish eyes and he would put them in all kinds of things. My scrambled eggs used to stare up at me. Not something they made regularly, made once, reheated leftovers for ages, but we ate it a lot for a while. My mom made what we came to call, quote, pepper soup. It initially was an accident. She was making a small batch of soup for dinner, and while shaking some black pepper in, the lid fell off and the entire container of pepper emptied itself into the soup. She scooped out what she could, but in the end, it was still way too peppery to eat. Ended up enlarging the batch of soup into 2 large canning pots, each about 5 gallons, before it was at a tolerable level. Us kids still found it way too peppery. Anyways, we ate that soup what seemed like every day for a couple months. We grew up dirt poor and relied heavily on the area's soup kitchens and food pantries. There were 5 of us kids with a stay-at-home mom, and my dad was unemployed for a few years, so we rarely could afford basic things like fruit. To keep us healthy, my dad would regularly fill an empty skim milk jug with water and add powdered milk plus powdered vitamin tablets, the type with the capsule, and shake it up, then put it in the fridge. We never really knew whether we were drinking actual milk or the vile false milk until we tasted it, since skim milk has the same appearance. To this day, my dad maintains that doing what he did kept us all healthy, as none of us got sick during his unemployment. I mean, geez, you gotta do what you gotta do. Props to that dad. My stepdad and mom used to make, quote, grilled cheese for lunch every weekend. Now, that's not so bad, right? Wrong. Bread with the knockoff Kraft processed cheese, microwaved for 2 to 5 minutes. No butter, no toast. Just soggy bread and burnt plastic cheese, if only in for 2 minutes. If it was cooked for 5 minutes, the bread would be rock hard and molten plastic. My parents have become great cooks now, but when my sister and I were kids, she was a total brat and a picky eater, so we'd wind up with plain, unseasoned chicken breasts and steamed broccoli and plain white rice way too often. And I wasn't allowed to put salt on it because salt was bad for me. And I guess it didn't occur to them to provide any condiment or something to give that crap some flavor. Okay, this isn't the first time I've heard of people's parents thinking salt is toxic, but one of my cousins is about the same age as my mom, and she is a salt fiend. We were at a Mexican restaurant one time, and she was shaking salt onto every single nacho she ate. She couldn't get enough. She wanted to be one with the salt. I swear if she ingested any more salt, she would have become a CSGO player mixed with a League of Legends streamer. I genuinely worry about the life expectancy of this woman. My mother makes this thing me and my brother can only refer to as compost salad. It starts on a skillet where she scrambles some eggs. Then, she adds 3 cups of kale and steams it, oftentimes burning the eggs in the process and releasing a vaguely fart-like scent into the atmosphere. Then, things get weird. She adds an entire can of kidney beans, bean water and all, mashing them into the eggy kale. She then adds cinnamon, nutmeg, curry powder, garlic powder, and salsa and Tabasco sauce. At this point, the smell is so nauseating it's nearly impossible to be in the same room as this abomination of a dish. After it's done being heated into mush, she puts it on a plate and adds vanilla yogurt on top. Looks like it was fished straight out of the trash. Needless to say, I refuse to let her make me food. And by the way, I really have no idea what's wrong with her, but something is definitely up if she thinks that this is an acceptable meal. Let me preface this by saying that my mother is in no way Hispanic. She is one of the whitest people I know. She grew up mainly in Central Florida and the Upper Midwest, rarely if at all coming into contact with Latin American culture except at the occasional restaurant. Despite this, she would routinely make, quote, arroz con pollo for dinner. This consisted of chicken, cooked until it was tough and chewy to ensure it was, quote, cooked through, and rolled in flavorless breadcrumbs from a can, served with a side of mealy, aggressively under-seasoned rice. Did I mention that there was almost no salt in any of this because salt was, quote, unhealthy? It was so unpleasant that I threw it right back up a few times, once even at the table. Somehow, she still wonders why I barely eat anything when I'm home for Thanksgiving. It amazes me how many of these posts mention a lack of salt. Your body needs salt. We specifically used iodized salt because a lack of iodine is one of the leading causes of preventable developmental problems in children. Pork in cider sauce. The cider in question was cheap as dirt White Lightning, the only time we actually bought it, I like to point out, and me and my sister hated it. We don't want this. Can we have something else? You ate it last time, so you must like it, so be quiet and eat it. We really don't like it. Tough. You'll eat what you're given or go hungry. My mom was awesome as we were growing up, and in all fairness, we did eat most of the things that we were given anyway, as she was a fantastic cook. But this was an abomination, beaten only by liver and onions. She stopped making it when I went to school hungry. I'd gotten up too late to eat breakfast, and the school phoned her up to express their concern and make sure there was nothing happening at home. As an American reading this, it grossed me out thinking of cooking pork in White Lightning. In America, that is usually home-distilled alcohol or moonshine. However, in the South, pork barbecue usually has a vinegar, cider-based sauce on it, and it's super tasty, so I could see where your mom was going with this. Yeah, but the only thing that was missing was the rest of the sauce! My grandma is an awful cook. She hates doing it, and you can definitely tell by the stuff she comes up with. Here's a few examples. Instant mashed potatoes with mayonnaise. Gag. Quote, peach cobbler, which was flour, peaches, and syrup. Fried chicken cooked long enough to burn it completely. Salt was the only seasoning she ever used. Spaghetti. No flavor. Just ground beef, never drained by the way, generic pasta sauce, and noodles. She got mad when I started using barbecue sauce to mask the nasty crap she made. Man, I put it in mashed potatoes, macaroni, rice, and meat. My mom was/is seriously the worst cook. The only time I ever ate anything good was when we had weekends with my dad and he took us to restaurants and let us order whatever we wanted. For a kid, I could eat a heck of a lot of lobster. My mom made these disgusting casseroles with fried Spam, Velveeta mac, and canned peas. Then it was topped off with those Kraft single slices and crushed up barbecue potato chips. She thought that was the ultimate in cooking. I still feel sick when I think about it. Sometimes for dinner, we would have chipped beef on toast, which is a disgusting, salty, Great Depression kind of food. And if it wasn't chipped beef, it was some kind of soup/tuna mixture over toast. If it came in a can, we probably ate it. This is probably why I taught myself how to cook. I went back home to visit last year, and I cooked dinner every night because I saw my mom pulling out the Spam and Velveeta, and there was no way I was going to let that happen. My dad didn't want me to leave after the 4th salted caramel apple pie I made. Not my parents, but growing up, I loved my grandmother's cooking. In retrospect, some of it was kind of weird. Her parents emigrated from Japan to Hawaii shortly after the turn of the century, and she'd have been about 7 when the Great Depression started. Combine that with World War II and frequent shipping issues, and she wound up with a lot of unusual culinary habits. Little Japanese lady, maybe 4'9" and 80 pounds on a good day, making spaghetti and adding corn. Her meatloaf had canned clams in it. I really love that one. Vienna sausages and Spam stewed in a sweet soy sauce broth, raw broccoli and sliced kamaboko fish cake sandwiches with lettuce, cucumber, and mayo, also pretty good actually, cubes of raw tofu tossed with canned tuna, soy sauce, onions, and some other things. Growing up in Hawaii, I didn't think anything of it. If seaweed and raw fish are part of the regular menu, none of that stuff's any weirder. Anyway, she made all of that stuff for her family, plus more traditional items like maki sushi, mochiko chicken, and other delicious things. For herself though, she'd maybe have a few cubes of tofu, a bowl of miso soup, and some rice. She loved dessert and sweets, but even then, she'd take a piece of chocolate and cut it into fourths. I last saw her in 2010, when she must have been about 88. She had her good days and her bad days, but she didn't cook anymore. She passed away in 2014. I miss her. I'm gonna get gushy for a bit. I think this is one of the greatest things about cooking and food in general. Taste is one of the most powerful senses we have because it's the most intimate. Think about it, you're putting something inside your body that's going to end up everywhere else inside your body. When you eat something, you remember how it tastes. You have a vast memory of tastes, and those tastes remind you of memories. You ever hear the phrase, just like grandma used to make? That's because if you grew up on grandma's cooking, you have that, for lack of a better term, flavor connection. It's why some people cry when they have certain foods. It reminds them of home, or a loved one, or a precious memory. It's like that scene in Ratatouille when Ego has that dish Remy makes. It's not that it's made perfectly. It's made lovingly. Reddit, what did your crush do that absolutely killed your interest? This was in college. We were acquaintances and had a few classes together. He was cute, funny, and I totally had a crush on him. He asked me out to dinner and a movie. At the restaurant, he ordered the most expensive things on the menu: appetizers, drinks, lobster, and even dessert. When the bill came, he said, "You got this, right?" I was so embarrassed, I paid. Then I said I'd skip the movie because I wasn't feeling well, and he asked me to give him $20 for gas and for wasting his time. I didn't and just left. Ugh. After that, he couldn't seem to understand why I didn't want to go out with him again. I was giving her a place to sleep when she was feuding with her mother. After weeks of picking up after her, I dared to complain. She had a screaming fit, picked up her crap, and left. I was glad to be rid of her, until later it got around to me that she was telling people on Facebook that I kicked her out for refusing to give me head. There's a lot I can forgive, but that was the first time I had ever had anyone just straight up make stuff up about me. Screw you, A. Her. Why are you leaving a tip? Me. Because the service was really good? Her. But she's fat. Bragged about drinking and driving. He told me that he and his friends have a, quote, nothing under 100 club, where they drink and then drive on the interstate going 100+ miles per hour and have to send a full-length Snapchat video of the speedometer to each other. 2 of my friends have been killed by a drunk driver 3 months prior. Well, I know someone whose tires are getting slashed. We went to Disneyland, where I had an annual pass with my friends and family for an event called Dapper Day, where you dress up in dapper clothing so everything looks very old-timey. I had done it for years with my friends, and he wanted to come, and my mom and siblings were going for the first time too. I was really excited, as it was the first time he had ever met my family. Well, we went on one ride with my family and my friends, and then he said, "Do you want to go on a ride? Just me and you?" I thought we'd come back and spend the rest of the day with them, but as soon as we were out of earshot, he was complaining about my family and how weird it was that they were there, and he wanted to do Disney with just me. But he had known they were coming, so I was confused. Then we went on one more ride, and he started complaining about how hot it was, how tired he was, and before lunch, he wanted to go home. I was super upset, but didn't want him leaving on his own, so I just went with him. But on the way home, I wished I had just let him leave and I could have stayed with all the people I loved. It was the first time in years my sister and my mom had been to Disney, and I didn't know it then, but it was the last time I got to go with my brothers before they grew up, and now they hate me. He was just some dude I dated, not a boyfriend or anything that lasted very long. I'm still so mad at myself for letting him ruin my day. But yeah, it absolutely killed anything I felt for him, and we broke up a few days later. Revealed his list of conquests. Not even my brother knows how many women I've slept with. Then he offered to take my virginity in the back of his pickup truck. I passed. I'm black, she's black, our crush was mutual. Then she found out I was once in a relationship with a white woman. She then jumped down a rabbit's hole of my, quote, betrayal of the black family and some other nonsense of my trauma of self-hatred. Never been turned off by anything faster than that. We were in the process of getting together. She had called over and we spent an afternoon watching movies and sitting close together. By about 8 in the evening, she was considering staying later and I was casually encouraging her. She asked if she could take a shower and I was like, yeah, sure, of course. Glad that the bathroom was clean and tidy and I had fresh towels. Anyway, about 4 minutes later, she calls me saying she needs help with the shower, and I give her a moment to get a towel around herself and knock on the bathroom door. She opens it completely naked and shows me that she's having trouble with the shower controls. So I'm kinda unsure whether to make the move or start with the controls. So I go with the flow and show her this is hot and cold, this is pressure, this is rainforest, and this is power jets. In the 5 seconds it takes me to do this, she has sat on the toilet, which is kinda a weird thing because I need to be able to make the next move. And she's sitting on the toilet, naked, with the lid up, looking all disinterested. I'm thinking, I've screwed it up. When suddenly, kersplosh. And she takes a dump right in front of me. And then another one. I was just like, I'll leave you to it. She asked if things didn't work out if I would mind if she went out with my roommate. I said I couldn't possibly do that to him and left. He tried to discreetly take photos of my feet. Nothing against people who are into that, but the way he was going about it was super creepy. She asked me if I was good with kids because she was pregnant with her ex and that she's not good with kids. It was the first date. We were teenagers, he lived in a different province, and we used to chat on Skype. He wanted me to think he was cool or something and would always talk about his drug use. He ended up faking a heroin overdose when we were on chat together. I was hysterically crying and freaking out, thinking I was watching someone dying and was trying to figure out how to call 911 in another province when he, quote, snapped out of it and told me that he was actually okay. I didn't talk to him much after that. She said I, quote, smile too much. Screw you, I smile when I want to. I try to find joy. Kept arranging times to talk and whatnot, then always forgot or was not available. Oh god, as someone with ADHD, I really felt this one. I'm so worried this is gonna happen to me one day. I tend to struggle with planning things if I want to participate in several social events, so I have to tell people in the current social event that I'll be going to another social event after I'm done with this one. Time for 3 back-to-back ones. Bullied the quiet kid in our class. Turned out to be the person eating everyone else's food from the break room fridge. Kissed me, and then, after he pulled away, told me he has a girlfriend. His sister actually approached me and let me know that he was once arrested for locking their other pregnant sister in their basement, went on a coke binge while she desperately tried to get out, and went outside to beat their unsuspecting neighbor's van with a golf club. That was a big ol' nope. This post is the equivalent of thinking, there's no way this is gonna get worse, and then it does. Yeah, I don't get washing. I just don't really like taking a shower or a bath or anything. Had a crush on this girl back in high school. She seemed like a sweet girl. After she rejected me, I let it go, but was still interested in maintaining some sort of friendship. Found out she was actually pretty toxic behind my back. She made fun of me for a lot of things that really didn't matter, like hand motions while talking, and I just lost interest in her entirely, even in a friendship. This was years ago on a first date. Tried to convince me to quit my job and put all my savings into gold bars, then demanded I let him read my tarot cards to see if we'd be a good fit. Nope, nope, nope. Huge crush on a fellow uni student. I was invited over for what I expected to be a platonic study date, but hey, any time spent is better than just being alone, or so I thought. Got there and found another student from class also. Okay, study group? Turns out her mom and her set us up for a full-press MLM pitch. Video, literature, the works. I stayed a bit not to be rude, excused myself shortly, and only talked to her in class just in passing from then on. Huge letdown. Edit, MLM means multi-level marketing, aka a pyramid scheme. Signing up to both buy and sell something, while recruiting others to sell also. You get a % of all your other recruit sales also. All the percentages basically flow upward, so the only way to make any significant money is to be high in the tree, towards the top of the pyramid. It's all bullcrap, basically. Told me he was only being nice to me because he was interested in a friend of mine. I see his Facebook post now. He is dumber than a box of rocks on a treadmill. Talked non-stop about himself and his accomplishments and never asked me one question about myself. She slept with my dad. She got blackout drunk at a party and violently crapped her pants. The smell alone completely turned me off of any interest I had. When I was a teenager, we worked together as lifeguards. I adored him so much until one day he just starts talking about this random woman that he didn't know and wasn't even there that was wearing shorts. He said he was fine until she sat down and had some cellulite on her thighs. And he kept being angry and talking about how she should be doing squats to be more appealing. Like, his rant was angry and long and no one was adding to his conversation. Just silence. After that, I took off my rose-colored glasses and saw that he was, in fact, a huge douchebag. I'm kinda grateful he showed himself that way, because I was really into him until then. Could have been a bad time for my teenage brain. We worked together, and as I got to know him more, I learned he talked badly about everyone. Nurses that are amazing, he'd belittle. Talk about how certain people don't know what they're doing because they've asked for an ultrasound IV as they were struggling getting a vein on a heroin addict. The paramedics were worthless, doctors don't know what they're doing, who he thought was hooking up, and it completely turned me off. He's in his early 40s and into gossip more than my teenage daughter. He picked me up for our first date and his car was disgusting. Not talking a few trash items, the entire back seat and floorboard was completely covered in piled up trash, even up front. I had to step on empty McDonald's bags, old soda bottles, wrappers, etc. to even get in. And all he said was, just move it around with your foot. No sorry or anything. Made me feel like trash too. Like, dang, couldn't even clean up a little? Dumped me after 9 months because she wasn't ready for a serious relationship. Got into a relationship the next day and was married within 5 months. Told me that she didn't like me back anymore, but maybe if I waited long enough, she would like me like that again. Edit, she told me that I had gotten more critical lately and I, quote, changed. So she wanted me to change back before she would be with me. Too critical about every word I uttered under the name of sarcasm. Light the back fence of the school on fire to, quote, impress a mate. Edit, should add that he did it whilst high. Basically shut me down and made it clear to me that I was being the typical nice guy cliche. This is back when I was about 20. After a couple days of sulking, I started examining my behavior and realized she was absolutely right. Glad it happened. My ideas of how a relationship should work were entirely twisted at the time. I got my stuff together shortly after, addressed my stupid and entitled behavior, worked on myself, mentally and physically, and eventually met an amazing woman who is now my wife. Scary to look back and think of how close I got to becoming one of those incel neckbeard types. I'll kiss you, but I'd never date you. Told me he liked dating broken girls so he could fix them. See you later, hard-on. Talked smack about every woman in his life. Should have seen the red flags earlier. Didn't realize until later that he probably did the same to me. Apparently, having an opinion about anything and speaking for yourself isn't a very ladylike thing to do. I was a midnight clerk at a truck stop, and a very, very good-looking man came in every night on his run to visit with me. He wore an ankle monitor for probation/parole. I asked about it, and he told me he was falsely accused of kissing his ex-wife's daughter. She was 13. I took his word. He seemed to be a real good guy. About 2 weeks later, we were bullcrapping and flirting, and a little girl about 12 years old came in with her dad. He looked that little girl up and down like a pervert. I was instantly sick to my stomach. She invited me over to her place, not as a date thing, but just to hang out as friends. Her house was absolutely filthy, and the glass of Coke she gave me had a hair in it. She was really cute and had a great personality and was genuinely a nice person, but as soon as I saw cat crap on the floor near the front door and just dirty everything, my crush disappeared and I left in a hurry. Well, it turns out he wasn't interested in girls, so I knew I had to kill my feelings or feel stupid for keeping them. Said she was starting up a group for LGBT youth. I asked her why, and then realized I had been barking up the wrong tree. Attempted to get through a horror movie together, and he kept letting the movie run, then rewinding the movie so that the horror never came. He pretended to be scared and would whine about the quote, scare that was coming. I guess he thought this was a cute gesture and would refuse to continue. It dragged a 5-minute scene into a 45-minute production of his, oh no, but I'm scared. No, I don't want to. This is terrifying. This was a guy who told me that he loved horror movies. He was full of really weird contradictions, but this was the straw that broke the camel's back. Edit, holy cow, this really blew up. Thanks for confirming I'm not insane for being annoyed with his actions. Thanks for the comments. A lot of them were hilarious. There were a lot of questions, so I'll try to answer some of them. What was the movie? It was an older J horror movie called Kuchisake Onna. I think the English title was something like The Carved Mouth Woman. You mentioned he fast-forwarded. Do you mean rewound? Nope, I do mean fast-forwarded. He would rewind, then fast-forward to get to the beginning of the scene, and then pause it and whine about how it was going to be scary. He would also study the pause scene and look at clues to determine what the scare was going to be. Did you comfort/hug him? It was maybe the second time we'd hung out together, so even though I was interested in him, it was too early to say we were dating, and I was pretty shy and kind of reserved, so no hugging would have happened even if it had all gone well. What were you doing during the 45 minutes? I remember thinking, is he for real? Then thought that somehow maybe he was trying to tease me. He's a man of a lot of contradictions. So I played along for a while. By the time 15 minutes passed, I'm sure I was sighing audibly. I suggested that we stop and maybe watch something else. He refused. Close to the 30-minute mark, I think I snapped and said words to the effect of, come on, it's probably not that bad. Let's just finish. Go through with it and continue the movie. Don't waste time. He laughed and kept up the one-man show of, I'm a sensitive man and I'm not afraid to show it. I gave up and just started looking through my phone because this was such a waste of time. And finally, I think he realized he'd gone too far and let the scene play out. Did you end up finishing the scene? Nope, because he tried the same thing at the next scary part and I made my excuses and got out of there. Was he a child? Nope, fully grown male of legal age. Why didn't you just stab him? I considered it, but I wasn't carrying my Dexter kill room equipment and the blood would have been too messy. Just kidding. He was tall and I'm pretty short. Probably wouldn't have ended well for me. Did you let him know why you didn't want to see him again? Nope. I never told him that this was the defining moment in which I lost interest. He was also kind of controlling and had a number of really weird quirks that I won't bore my fellow Redditors with. Basically, we just didn't talk as much after that, and that was that. Dude was the perfect epitome of the term douchebag. He used to be nice to people only to gain their trust and then betray them. He was attractive though, and a smooth talker as well. We started talking, became friends, and I developed a crush on him. Unfortunately, I never knew then what type of double-headed snake he was. Then, on one day, I witnessed him throwing his best friend under the bus just to save his reputation. Completely lost interest, cut ties with him, and he gave no craps about it. Only then did I realize how toxic people can be sometimes. Started gaming with him and learned that he threw tantrums worthy of a toddler when losing matches. She physically shushed me in a group with her finger on my lips while I was singing along with my friends to a cover band. She ate a live snail. I was in 6th grade. She detested cats and insisted that I give up my furry buddy before she'd move in with me. It wasn't that she was allergic to cats. She issued the ultimatum because, according to her, my cat, quote, received too much of my time and affection and she wasn't going to compete. We played Monopoly. That game brings out the absolute worst in people. Overheard her insulting my hobbies, clothes, hairstyle, personality, etc. with their friends. Now, I was never Prince Charming, but man, that hurt. He didn't believe in dinosaurs. One of those super religious types, and someone got into a conversation with him about dinosaurs, and he was absolutely convinced that, quote, dinosaur bones were put there by the devil to trick us. As a firm lover of dinosaurs, as soon as I heard that, any and all attraction disappeared. Bouncer at a bar I used to go to. I had a mad crush on him, and he was beautiful. He was a bit of a tart. Every night, some starry-eyed, equally beautiful woman would leave with him. Being a bit of a tart was not a deal-breaker for me. I was too back then, if not as successful as him as I'm not a super pretty girl. But one night, I guess he left crap too late. The hot girls were gone, and he informed me that he was willing to take me home that night. No. Nothing less sexy than, "That'll do, pig." Being treated like a sure thing, and of course the answer is going to be yes, because how would someone like me turn down someone like him? Being rude to the waiter and complaining that food is taking too long during dinner rush hour. I worked in the industry for a year. It's not easy when being slammed during rush. Started dating my best friend after flirting heavily with me for a week. She offered to drive and pick me up in her car because we had plans to go out to dinner and get to know each other better. I realized after about 20 minutes she was not driving to the restaurant and instead stopped at a gas station to get into someone else's car and buy drugs. Basically made me an accessory to a drug deal under false pretenses. My 18-year-old self thought it would be cute to invite him to a Christmas parade, but this dude had the audacity to ask me why I thought he would ever be interested in someone like me. Girl in car behind him honked when the light turned green. He got out of the car and began screaming and banging on her windshield. That's when I knew he was a psycho and I needed to get out of that relationship. Took me a destroyed home and 2 restraining orders later, but we've been broken up for 3 years now. She brought a friend to dinner with us, which was okay, I didn't mind. Then they both shoplifted afterward while I was on the other side of the store. Told her I didn't date thieves and she broke down apologizing. Chewed with her mouth open on our first date. I never thought something like that could kill my interest so rapidly. People who have signed non-disclosure agreements that have now expired or for whatever reason are no longer valid. What couldn't you tell us but now can? House Hunters guest checking in. I never made the show because I didn't close on the house. 1. I had to have a house under contract before going on the show. 2. They would select the other houses we were, quote, interested in. 3. I was assigned another significant other who was more, quote, interesting than my actual SO. That someone was making a wristwatch with 2 faces so you could set one to local time and one to the time you're from, for international travelers. My boss almost immediately broke it and had to pay. I was a model for a few big name/well-known makeup companies. I did several print ads for magazines and a few television commercials. The makeup artists do use the product advertised, but minimally. Like that mascara they're touting? It's over really good fake eyelashes, and they also used another brand of mascara along with the one they're trying to sell you. Also, the clothes in the ads you see are pinned to high heaven on the model. They fit nothing like they look. It's not you. It's not your body. It's fake advertising. Most of us models look just like you, wearing all that crap without the pins and tucks and double-sided tape. Did some work on the trading floor at Goldman Sachs. I had access to all trading accounts and transactions. Came across some shady-looking accounts which did not meet policy. It did not use clearly identifiable name, and I could not find records of creation or testing for it, etc. I asked my supervisor if I should look into this. He turned to me and said, "We don't ask about those accounts. Just ignore them. Orders from the top." Trading account creation is a long and detailed process that requires formal approval from multiple lines of management. These accounts circumvented all that and were basically anonymous with no trace. They were also trading high volume, and I was told to accept and ignore them. A friend of mine got a job at a prominent local distillery that makes an extremely popular flavored whiskey. They literally buy whiskey from a third-party distillery and dump Tarani flavoring syrup into it. One of my friend's brothers was on the MTV show Room Raiders. Everything in the show is staged. All of the items that they would find were planted. At the end of the show, the prize was not a date with the girl that he, quote, picked, he just got her phone number. Saw the new Ferrari hybrid tech by employee error and couldn't speak or mention it until today, as they launched a new hybrid model. I can now tell you that Ferrari intends to have a car with 3 hybrid motors, and that's pretty much it. Amazon made me sign one when I worked with a company that painted their airplanes before the public knew they had them. I did the FAA paperwork. I was literally only one of like 7 people to see their airplane fully purple with their logo on it. I was actually taken off the project for a day because they thought I lied about not having a Facebook. They meant business. I signed an NDA once when I was an extra on, quote, Mortal Engines. If you watch the movie, you'll learn more than what I did on set. Posted this before if it sounds familiar. Not me, but a guy I know was on Cash Cab. A lot of it was faked. He was told he will be on a travel food show and would get picked up by a fake taxi at a certain location at a certain time. There were camera crews all over outside the taxi, and there's no way on earth you might mistake it for a real cab. Previous pharmacy chain I worked for, always at risk of robbery for opiates, and we were always taught to give the robber what they want with no questions asked. Have heard of times that pharmacists instead gave bottles of Oxy with Tylenol in it instead, and other things that were reckless and dangerous due to possible retaliation when and if they figure out they have been duped. New policy in NDA comes out where specific opiates were placed in a safe with GPS tracker and charger, so when it is removed from radius of origin, it issues remote notification to third party that tracks location and works with local LEO to find the wanted party. I worked for a native casino. The golf courses lost a ton of money for us, as did the advertising for the courses. Food we generally broke even on because of all the comps. If a crime was committed by a dealer, they would watch the dealer for 3 months to see if there were accomplices. They used facial recognition and would pair match you, so if the same person sat with the same dealer over and over, they would know. This way, they could look for accomplices. Then, when they busted you, they would sit you down and make you watch a video of you breaking the law. They did this because they wanted you to plead guilty as opposed to an expensive trial. I had to sign an NDA because I was part of a test screening for The Dark Tower with Idris Elba. Tried to tell them it sucked. They didn't want to listen. We used an extract to flavor our peanut butter porter. Oh, God, it feels good to get that off my chest. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you like Am I the Genius, you'll probably love Am I the Jerk, link down below. I signed an NDA to waitress at a local family-owned restaurant. The owner was nuts, definitely had a severe personality disorder, and was worried about his recipes getting leaked. The restaurant is dead now, and his secret recipes consisted almost solely of frozen packaged food. Edit, guys, stop trying to guess what restaurant it is. You never will. There are millions of family-owned places with crazy bosses that go under. You don't know the place, and I'm not going to tell you. Also, Mr. Krabs pays his employees enough to own houses and pets. I wish I worked for him. Signed an NDA when I worked as a fit model for Katy Perry's shoe line. Basically, a fit model is used for their good proportions to test out the fit of garments. I'm a solid size 7.5, so hooray for being average. I was hired on 2 occasions and got to hang out and give her my opinion on the fit, feeling, and comfort of different shoes. Didn't think she'd actually be there, but both times she was present and totally running the show. Super nice woman in person and remembered me when we met again. Also, she apologized for making me wait so long, which I thought was nice. It was a late night meeting as she just wrapped shooting a music video. Her dog is really cute too, and I got to save it when it got stuck behind a wall panel. Recycling company would throw away a lot of stuff. They collected the money from government subsidies while leaving the employees to a crap salary in a hazardous workplace. R/OSHA would have freaked out. That included having dirty syringes, thank God I didn't get stabbed by one, where people would sort the materials. It was awful. Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition had an amazing online character builder that made character creation a breeze. It listed all of the possible skills per race and class that was intuitive and made theory crafting for characters easy. Personal conjecture? They canned it because it took away from the pen and paper aspect of the game, and they were afraid with an online tool it'd take away from book sales. Worked for a short time as a quality assurance tester at EA and wasn't allowed to talk about the game I was testing, the console port for The Sims 4. There wasn't really much to talk about, but since the first few versions were basically just running the PC version on a console, there were a lot of bugs with it. One of the worst was a lighting bug we started referring to as disco mode, since it caused a bunch of multicolored squares to show up on everything at night or in dark areas. In 1990, I signed an NDA at Chili's when they showed me how to make their new Awesome Blossom. No other restaurant in town had anything like it, and it was hugely popular at the time. Worked at a matchmaking company. It's all bullcrap. It's just throwing darts at a wall until something sticks. There's no science or magic to it at all. Edit, I didn't work for an internet matching company, so they may have a different process. What we did was get a paid client and set them up on dates. The dates we found were from a pool of women, and we would just keep picking one after another. I quit because I felt like the women were just being used, and I became uncomfortable profiting off people's hopes. They very much play up on finding you true love and it's a process, blah blah. They'll very much play up on the fairy tale romance. It did change me. I don't really date anymore because I don't trust the true intentions of people anymore. I became very jaded to dating after all of that. Kraft Macaroni and Cheese are coming out with the more, quote, modern and upscale version to expand their market from lower-income folks to higher-income folks. It is almost entirely the same product as the 69-cent blue box, but will have a lighter, less orangey color that will be sold as shells and not macaroni. The box will be shaped differently, and it will go for $2.50 or more. Stated to be released by 1995. A certain global conferencing company still saves passwords for their web products in plain text. Any, and I mean any, employee that works there can see the password. My password there was "not my pass, you idiot," because I know other people would see it eventually, and they'd even comment/laugh about it. Also, we once discovered that our main conferencing software was letting you sign in regardless of the password you entered, meaning you could sign in with any email address. Once we brought it up, we were first immediately stonewalled and told not to say anything about it in written format. TLDR, they had the dev team and legal on a conference call, and they decided it was best to just keep it quiet until they fixed it later that day. No client was to be notified of the issue. And the ones that knew of it were basically given a runaround until they gave up. They also added call spoofing to the software. They called it something fancier, but it was call spoofing. You could make a call and make it appear from any number you wanted. My team raised this concern many times, but were countered with, quote, "No one will actually use it for that." Okay. That place was a goldmine of security risks. There is going to be a Capri Sun sports flavor in roughly 2003. I was a taste tester for Kraft Foods when I was 10. We didn't sign an NDA, but it was supposed to be a secret. Sony got hacked over that North Korea movie because of a 5-year-old account they didn't delete or monitor from an ex-employee. Mini Cooper/BMW replaced our car because the high-pressure fuel pump failed 6 times within 6 months. However, the recorded reason for the replacement of the car was because of, quote, stained interior from dirty mechanic hands, so it wasn't replaced via the Lemon Law. A government in 1972 identified a terrorist by his wife's breasts from satellite images. That's no moon. That's a space station. I was a translator, contractor, for the US military. I also translated Marvel comic books. Marvel had tighter security. Google doesn't hire direct support employees. They open small projects in the US, then hire up to 250 contract employees of varying support positions for the project. Once they get the stats needed to run everything efficiently, they have mass layoffs and outsource their jobs to a country, Philippines/India, that's willing to accept much less than the US counterpart. At the same time, Google rakes in a huge tax cut because they're, quote, creating jobs in the local communities. Edit, yes, this includes YouTube and YouTube content review. I was actually an actor in that commercial that said I wasn't. When I was a kid, I visited the dentist for a cavity. While there, the dentist slipped while drilling my tooth and drilled a hole under my tongue. My mom saw me tense up, and my dentist said, "Oh, nicked her there a bit, so you might see a little blood." I got home, and after an hour, my entire neck was swollen up like a frog, and my voice was squeaky because of the air pressure. A pocket of air was pressing against my heart. Dirty air at that, because of the bacteria in my mouth. I was admitted to the hospital as a code 4, with the code 5 being dead. When my mom tried to sue the dentist for damages, he claimed I was kicking and screaming and out of control during the appointment, even getting his secretary to vouch for him and testify. Total BS. I liked the dentist, and I was a people pleaser. Also, laughing gas. My mom's lawyer was super pessimistic and told her just to settle and sign an NDA because she had a small chance of winning. So, my mom settled, being naive and scared to take on an office full of liars. She could never disclose who the dentist was, and we've heard other horror stories throughout the years about this dentist effing up other people's mouths. It sucks because every lawyer we've talked to after the fact says we had a very strong case, and it's likely we would have won. Like, really won. I'm pretty sure the company is bankrupt now, since it's been almost 15 years and the product hasn't seen the light of day. I was interviewing with a company that was working on a new design for a public toilet that was going to change everything. It consisted of the following. 1. A pair of toilets back to back. One would rotate up into the wall where it would be thoroughly cleaned and then rotated back down so the other, recently used toilet could be swung up into the wall for its turn in the washer. 2. The toilets wouldn't have the traditional water pool, but would instead have a conveyor belt that would carry the poo and whatever else back to an open pipe, clog-free. I quickly saw that this product was going nowhere, so I declined to work for them, but sent them a 2 or 3 page email about the pitfalls of the design. 1. What happens when the auto-swapping toilet machine accidentally activates while someone is on the loo? 2. How much more expensive will this be than a regular porcelain John? 3. How hard will it be to retrofit all of the machinery and plumbing for the auto wash into existing architecture? 4. How do you intend on cleaning a conveyor belt that has been exposed to human waste plus whatever other trash that gets put down onto the unit? 5. What will an open vent to the sewer smell like if you don't have the water separation like you do with a regular toilet? Welcome to the toilet of the future. Except we're going back to the past where we didn't have indoor plumbing, but also the outhouses are floating! A huge part of The Bachelorette was scripted. The company I worked for at the time was a major tourism service provider and featured prominently in one of the seasons. We were all pulled into meetings with the higher-up managers, given a spiel about what was in our best interest, and spilling any secrets was punishable by a $5 million lawsuit. Please sign here. I gave zero craps about the show at the time. Still don't. Just wanted to do my job. The quote, Bachelorette herself was clearly there to further her public profile or quote, acting career. The scenes were always set up before filming. Behind the camera, nothing was happening. The cast were told where to go, what to do, and how to do it. If half those guys weren't on their phones texting their real girlfriends most of the time, I would be surprised. So fake. So 100% fake. Edit. Well, this is getting a lot more attention than I thought it would. Here's a few tidbits. The NDA was only that we wouldn't spill secrets about the show before episodes involving our company aired. We were also not allowed to, quote, disparage the company, which honestly was easy to abide by since we were treated well and we had excellent managers. The Bachelorette has since gone on to a fairly successful TV career, hosting several shows. All of her official press credits The Bachelorette and her exposure during another elimination-style reality TV show with launching her career. I used to work for a company in the Middle East that provided relocation services to people in America. We represented 3 main companies under 9 different names, which changed every so often when the reviews got really bad. We had receptionists whose main task, aside from damage control, was to write a few extremely positive reviews for each company every single day in order to counter all the negative ones. Our job was to catalog everything our clients wanted to move and then provide the best possible price while lying through our teeth about the service itself. We promised professional movers who had all the necessary training and tools for the job, great prices, quick deliveries, you name it. On moving day, the movers who showed up were often in unmarked trucks or ones with completely different names and branding on them. The workers were often immigrants who were paid under the table and had no experience whatsoever. The deliveries themselves often took a long time, and items were often lost as multiple moves would be stacked into one truck without much labeling of items or categorizing in general. As mentioned earlier, we changed company names fairly often as the negative reviews and bad press stacked up. Moving is a toxic business, and people will always try to undermine and cheat. This is something you should never cheap out on, as the money is well worth the comfort of knowing your move is in good hands. If you are moving, I recommend finding a company that is local if possible, so that you can meet the people who represent it and see that their business is legitimate. More importantly, they will be able to send someone to survey your belongings and give a more realistic quote and time estimate. Even if it costs much more than the quotes you receive online or from salesmen, it is well worth the peace of mind on an already stressful venture. My dad did some top-secret contract work for the Department of Defense back in the 1960s, and he signed a lifelong NDA as part of that job. He's dead now, so I guess it's safe to talk about it. The thing is, he never did break the NDA in any context. The strange part was that the NDA specifically prohibited him from using certain words ever again. The trouble is, some of the words are common vocabulary and it became obvious over the years which words he did not use. Words I know he could not say, because he would find other ways of saying them instead, included ball, balloon, briefcase, bomb, and nuclear. It would have made more sense for him to just say, there's a balloon, instead of, there's an inflatable latex object, but you gotta do what you gotta do. Eventually, he did gradually stop avoiding those words for the most part, although he would not discuss the NDA. I've worked with many internet service providers, at the past one of which I'm still under NDA for, but as for the other ones, the equipment replacement fee, Divide it by 3. That's how much we paid for the box versus how much we are going to charge you. If you're having an issue / something is broken and you want more money, just escalate the issue about twice for maximum return. Don't go past the supervisor's supervisor, however, because while there may be a level above them still within the call center, if you hit corporate, be prepared, because they are not required to be nice. As an example of the above, the story I tell is an angry lady who was out of service for about 6 hours. She was not happy with our get off our phone offer and escalated again. By doing so, she passed on about $65 worth of credits, 2/3 of her total bill, and a going forward discount on her total bill that would save her about $7 a month for another $80 over the next year. That was not good enough. She escalated past us and the word came back via email. Her credit for time out of service was instead calculated down to the minute, meaning instead of $65, her new offer was now $1.12 and no discount off the monthly bill. If she attempts to escalate again, I was told to inform her we would take advantage of our service policy and cancel her account. Please return your modem within 30 days or face a $99.99 replacement charge. Had to sign an NDA for a secure shipment that came into a building I ran security at. Shipment came in at 2 a.m., unmarked transit van, 2 guys had to verify their biometrics and give me the correct password, then was required to deactivate the cameras on the floors along the travel routes they took inside the building and wipe the footage of them entering and leaving. Long play videotapes, so easy to say, oops, tape got chewed. They unpacked a set of vases and trundled off to put them in a private vault. Don't know what the heck was in them, but I've seen less security for pallets of precious metal bullion. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description too. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.